Chapter 1521. Half of the shares. Reina was stunned when she heard that. She quickly shook her head and said, "No way. You're the one who created the hot pot, and you're the one who invested in it. I didn't do anything, so how can I have so much of the shares? I just want ordinary people to be able to eat delicious hot pot. Letting more people taste delicious hot pot is a very beautiful idea in itself. It's also the spirit that a chef should have. Besides, how can you say that you didn't do anything? Opening a hot pot restaurant is not a simple thing. The location of the restaurant, the renovation, the selection of ingredients, the daily management of the hot pot restaurant. Everything requires a lot of effort and time." Meg smiled at Reina. "To me, this is an investment of money and technology, and Reina, you're a very suitable partner. Half of the shares is the cornerstone of our cooperation, and it's also what you deserve." But Reina was still a little hesitant. "I hope that your hot pot restaurant will not be limited to Chaos City. Why don't you try to make the whole world fall in love with hot pot?" Meg asked Reina. Make the whole world fall in love with hot pot. Reina's eyes gradually lit up, and she felt that the world in her mind had suddenly opened up. The world outside of Chaos City was too far away for her, who used to work hard just to survive. But now, her boss had placed the whole world in front of her. Let hot pot out of Mamie's, out of Chaos City, and make the whole world fall in love with hot pot. Just thinking about it made Reina's heart start to beat faster. "We can plan this slowly. There's no hurry. I'll go and prepare breakfast for everyone first." Meg stood up and walked to the kitchen. He felt that Reina could grow into an excellent manager. Of course, he hoped that she could become the hot pot queen of her generation. As for him, he would become the man behind the hot pot queen. Just thinking about it made Meg feel that this was a very cost-effective angel investment. This was an almost completely empty market, and the popularity of Mamie's hot pot zone had already proved the vastness of the market. Luna sat in her seat and seriously considered Meg's words. Although she felt that the conditions offered by her boss were too generous, she didn't want to lose such a life-changing opportunity. Opening a hot pot restaurant with the boss and being threatened by Bennett were two completely different feelings. There was no need to bear the infamy of being a traitor, nor did he have to go against his heart. Furthermore, they had the same goals. As a person who had dreamed of becoming a chef since childhood and serving more delicious food to customers, Reina was indeed tempted by Meg's proposal. Due to the limitations of the ingredients, the restaurant's exquisite hot pot was destined to be unable to be widely promoted. Then, how to make a down-to-earth hot pot was what she and the new hot pot restaurant had to do. "If I don't do it, no one will do it." Reina turned to look at Meg, who was busy in the kitchen. Her boss was a chef who pursued perfection. Apart from the daily operations of the restaurant, he spent most of his energy on developing new products. Her boss was the most talented chef she had ever seen. The speed at which he developed new products was shocking. His bold and imaginative ideas and novel cooking methods could shake the industry every time. If someone like him wasted his energy on hot pot, it would definitely be a huge loss to the world of chefs. As for her, she liked hot pot, but she also knew that her ability was limited. To be able to specialize in hot pot and make it popular while ensuring that its taste would not be lost to the greatest extent was already a very difficult thing to do. Thinking of this, her gaze gradually became firm. After the morning operating hours, Meg had nothing to do, so he continued to teach Harris and Chapman how to make husband and wife long slice. Chapman's husband and wife long slice had already reached 80 to 90% of Meg's standard. He was also getting more and more familiar with the details. Meanwhile, Harris relied on his rich experience and standards that were far beyond normal chefs to bridge the gap between him and Chapman, which was created by Meg's guidance. The flavor of the husband and wife long slice also became more and more authentic. Meg tasted the husband and wife long slice that the two of them had just made, and curiously asked, "When are you guys planning to leave Chaos City?" Chaos City is a rather interesting place. We don't mind staying here for a while longer. Harris smiled at Meg and fawned over him. If Master doesn't mind, you can teach us a few more dishes. I have great respect for that. Buddha jumps over the wall. Your hair is almost fully grown. Why are you still staring at Buddha jumps over the wall? Meg couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at the fine black hair on Harris's head. Isn't this a case of once bitten twice shy? It's one thing to grow it back, but it's another thing to prevent it from falling off. Harris chuckled. Meg rolled his eyes. It wasn't that he wasn't willing to teach Buddha jumps over the wall, but the complexity of this dish, and the stringent requirements for the ingredients, determined that it was impossible to make Buddha jumps over the wall anywhere else after leaving Meg's kitchen. As for the hair growth effect, Meg guessed that it was mostly due to one or a few of the ingredients' characteristics. If the same ingredients were grown in another place, they might not have the same effect. However, he had also benefited a lot from spending time with Harris these few days, especially in terms of cutting skills. He had learned many very practical techniques from Harris, and Harris's understanding of the ingredients' characteristics also amazed him. Mother, boss asked me to. Raina went back to the dormitory, and told her mother about Meg's suggestion in the morning. Karen's thought for a while, and shook her head. Mr. Mack is a good person. He just saved you yesterday, and now he wants to help you open a restaurant. He's providing the skills and money. You're just doing something, and you're getting half of the shares for no reason. We don't deserve it. Raina nodded. She hesitated for a while, and said, but, if I don't do it, no one will be able to promote Hot Pot. Boss has more important things to do, and the others are very busy too. I really want more people to eat Hot Pot. Chaos City, and even people outside of Chaos City, can also taste the affordable Hot Pot. Karen's looked at the sparkle in Raina's eyes as if there were little suns. She smiled and nodded. Then, go ahead. Mr. Mack supports you, and so do I, boss. I've thought about it. I'm willing to be in charge of opening a new hot pot restaurant. Raina stayed behind after the lunch service. She looked at Meg, who was taking off his apron, and seriously said, but, I only want 10% of the hot pot restaurant's shares. Chapter 15:22. Meg looked at the determined Raina. After a moment of silence, he nodded, and said, all right. Since you're only willing to take 10% of the shares, I won't force you. Out of the 90% shares that I have, I will take out 40% in the future to set up a hot pot fund in our names to help women and children. Raina heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on her face again. Although she didn't know if the new hot pot restaurant could be profitable and expand, she agreed with Meg's suggestion very much. Women and children were the disadvantaged group, and it was even harder for them to survive in the slums. If she could do something for them, it would be very meaningful to her. Meg walked to the counter, and took out a stack of banknotes from the drawer. He put it in a small money bag, and passed it to Raina. Here are 2 million copper coins worth of banknotes. Take it first. If you don't have enough in the future, let me know. Raina looked at the money bag, and said hesitantly, I'll withdraw it from you in installments. I'll report to you how much money I spend at any time. No, you don't have to report anything to me. You just have to treat me to a meal when the restaurant is opened. The management rights of this restaurant will belong to you completely, including how to use the initial investment of 2 million. Meg shook his head. But... Raina looked at Meg's trusting gaze. She hesitated for a moment, but still reached out to take the money bag. She nodded solemnly and said, I will use every cent well. Don't worry. Don't worry about the budget. If it's not enough, I can add more. If you encountered any problems with the location of the restaurant, I can help you solve it. As for the other matters, I'll leave them to you. Meg smiled. He didn't know how big the hot pot restaurant Raina wanted to open. If it was a restaurant that could accommodate 1,000 people, it would cost more than $2 million to set up the restaurant. Of course, with a population of 1 million in Chaos City, there was no need to worry about having too many empty seats for the only authentic and affordable hot pot restaurant. If Raina could control the taste well and not deviate too much, she might even be able to divert a batch of high-spending customers from Amy's. A store. Raina furrowed her brows as she pondered. It would be best to open a store in the Aden Square. It had convenient transportation, and there was a lot of food and beverage businesses. However, the rent for the shops in the Aden Square was extremely expensive. She wanted to open a large hot pot restaurant that could accommodate more than 1,000 people. That way, the customers wouldn't have to wait in line for a seat, and it would be easier to eat hot pot. Meg also began to think seriously. Malbai next door had reserved a few shops for him. The area was not small, and it was more than enough to open a hot pot restaurant. However, it was a little strange that a new hot pot restaurant had opened next to Mamie's. Ding-ling. At this moment, a bell rang outside the door. Who? Meg walked to the door doubtfully. When he opened the door, he saw a man wearing a black hat and a loose black windbreaker standing outside. Although the man's hat was pulled down very low, Meg could still recognize him at first glance. Burton looked up at Meg and said in a low voice, Mr. Mack, I need to explain to you about what happened yesterday and solve the problem. Come in. Raina is here too. Meg stepped aside to let Burton in. Boss, if you have something to discuss, I'll take my leave first. Raina took a look at Burton, who was dressed mysteriously, and prepared to leave first. Burton took off his hat and said to Raina, Miss Raina, right? I'm from the Grey Temple. I'm here on behalf of the Grey Temple to apologize to you and Mr. Meg, and to discuss the related compensation. Hello. Raina was stunned. She recognized that this was the Grey Temple officer who had brought his men to arrest all the bad guys last night, and quickly nodded. Meg closed the door, and shook his head. I don't have to compensate, but the Grey Temple should indeed apologize and compensate Raina for the shock and harm she had suffered. This kind of thing shouldn't have happened. Miss Raina, on behalf of the Grey Temple, I sincerely apologize to you for what happened yesterday, Burton said sincerely as he bowed 90 degrees to Raina. It's all right. Raina waved her hand helplessly, and looked at Meg for help. Meg was also looking at Burton in shock. He knew that Burton was the head of the Grey Temple's intelligence department, and could be considered a big shot in Chaos City. Yet, he was actually willing to lower himself to apologize to Raina. Burton straightened his back, and continued to say to Raina, yesterday's incident was caused by our negligence. It's also our fault that we didn't detect and eliminate the corruption of the Grey Temple's internal personnel in time. As the law enforcement agency of Chaos City, the Grey Temple failed to fulfill its duty to protect the residents. We have to reflect on this and apologize to you. Thank you for coming to save us last night, and for treating my injuries. Raina nodded quickly. She was a little dazed. What's the compensation? Meg asked with a smile. He was a little curious about what kind of compensation Burton was going to offer since he was here to apologize. Raina quickly shook her head, and said, It's all right. There's no need for compensation. That big sister had already cured me yesterday. Regarding our mistake yesterday, the Grey Temple has decided to compensate you with a shop under the perpetrator's name. This is the full set of documents, including the property ownership certificate and the land ownership certificate. After the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle's confirmation, that shop belongs to you from now on. Burton took out a thick craft paper bag from his coat, and handed it to Raina with both hands. This. Raina looked at Meg with a little fear. Meg smiled, and said, "Take it. This is the price that bastard should pay for everything he did to you. The Grey Temple is just passing it to you." He was very curious about which shop the Grey Temple was giving Raina. However, as long as it was in the Aden Square, it would be worth at least 100,000 copper coins. It was a huge income for Raina. Raina heard that, and reached out to take the paper bag. Then, she looked at Burton and said, "Thank you. This is what you deserve." Burton also smiled, and then left. "This was originally the Lord's apology gift to you." Burton lowered his hat at the door, and looked at Meg softly. "You know, I don't need a shop like this." Meg smiled. "You might regret it." Burton smiled, and quickly left. "Regret?" Meg raised his eyebrows. He turned around, and saw Raina looking at the property ownership certificate in her hand with a shocked expression. "Boss, this is a shop with an area of 3,000 square meters." Raina looked up at Meg, and her voice was trembling. Chapter 15:23. 3,000 square meters? Meg was also taken aback when he heard that. He suddenly understood what Bolton meant. Amy's, including the designated hot pot area, was only about 500 square meters. However, the shop that the Grey Temple offered as an apology gift was actually 3,000 square meters. Furthermore, it's in Aden Square. "It's about 300 meters away from our restaurant," Raina continued. Meg did a rough estimation. This apology gift was worth more than 30 million. The Grey Temple is really generous. Meg couldn't help but chuckle. Apart from being surprised, he didn't feel any jealousy or remorse. This is too expensive." Raina finally regained her senses. She held the information in her hands as if it was a hot potato. She couldn't wait to throw it away. "No, you deserve it." Meg smiled at Raina and said, "Furthermore, with this shop, you don't have to worry about where to open a hot pot restaurant. If I remember correctly, there is indeed a sizable restaurant that has been under construction and renovation recently. It might be the hot pot restaurant that Bennett wants you to be the manager of." But Raina was still a little uncomfortable. "Even if you don't want it and return it to the Grey Temple, it will end up in someone else's hands. You might as well take it and open a new hot pot restaurant." Meg looked at Raina and seriously said, "Perhaps you don't know the value of this shop. Because of Amy's, the price of the shop in the northwest corner of Aden Square has skyrocketed. Now, it's more than 10,000 copper coins per unit. This means that this shop is worth more than 30 million copper coins. Even if you don't open a hot pot restaurant in the future, you and your mother will be able to live comfortably just by collecting rent every year, 30 million. Raina was dumbfounded. She couldn't imagine how huge that number was. And such an expensive shop actually belonged to her now. Meg continued with a smile, and said, "Of course, if you can open hot pot restaurants all over the Norland continent, a shop worth 30 million is just the beginning. The world outside Chaos City is very big." "Yes." Raina looked at Meg and solemnly put away the information in her hands. She nodded and said, "I will make good use of it. Let's go. Since we have nothing to do now, let's go take a look at your new shop." Meg took a thick coat from the side and put it on before walking towards the door. Raina held the documents tightly in her arms and quickly caught up with Meg. The shop that Raina received as a gift was indeed very large. It had 2 floors. Apart from the lack of a signboard, the decoration was basically completed. The walls were paved with marble, exuding a bright and luxurious light. However, at this moment, it was quiet inside and outside. The construction workers seemed to have all evacuated overnight. The door was ajar and there was no padlock. "Let's go in and take a look." Meg pushed the door open and walked in. The spacious hall was filled with custom-made hot pot tables. They were basically custom-made to Mamie's hot pot tables. This made Meg suspect that this world also had tape measures. The decoration of the restaurant's interior was also basically completed. Only some construction materials were left. The dazzling decoration style suited Bennett's temperament very well. It should have been designed by the same designer as his tea house. It forcefully created the feeling of a nouveau riche. Apart from the spacious hall on the first floor, there were 2 rows of private rooms on both sides. The decoration was even more luxurious. According to the number of seats, just the first floor alone could accommodate close to 1,000 people eating at the same time. The kitchen is on the second floor. Meg walked around the first floor, but didn't find the kitchen. Thus, he went up the stairs to the second floor. There were no private rooms on the second floor. There was only a hall of about 500 square meters. It was also filled with standard hot pot tables. After passing through the hall, there was a huge kitchen of about 1,000 square meters. The decoration was already completed. Only the kitchen utensils had yet to be brought in. A large hot pot restaurant that can start operating as soon as you enter. This will save you a lot of trouble. Meg walked around the kitchen and turned to look at Raina, whose mouth was wide open the entire time. It's so big. Can I really open such a big hot pot restaurant?" Raina shrugged, but she was already looking forward to it. "I think it's fine." Meg smiled. If such a place could be revived, even if the price per customer was 100 copper coins, the daily turnover would probably be comparable to Amy's. Raina stayed in the new hot pot restaurant to take inventory of the things that needed to be added or subtracted, while Meg returned to the restaurant in advance. He had decided to completely ignore the new hot pot restaurant and be a qualified investor. Bennett definitely wouldn't be able to get out in this lifetime. He could be considered to have gotten rid of a pest for Chaos City. As for how the Grey Temple was going to deal with it, that wasn't something he should be concerned about. He believed that Roland wouldn't allow a pest to exist in the Grey Temple. What he needed to prepare now was to go to the Twilight Forest the next day. He needed to ensure that the mission was completed to the greatest extent, and at the same time, ensure that everyone in the restaurant could escape unscathed. The Falk tribe was the second largest orc tribe, after all. Although their power had decreased greatly after the internal strife, they still had a few 10th-tier powerhouses and a batch of 8th-tier and 9th-tier powerhouses. Meg received the latest intelligence about the Falk tribe and the orcs from the Grey Temple not long after he returned to the restaurant, as well as a name and meeting location. If you encounter an emergency in the Falk tribe, you can go to Stone Alley to look for Sim Tavern's boss, Old Sim. He will provide you with help. Meg stared at that piece of paper for a while before rubbing it with his fingers, and turning it into dust. Ding! Sim Tavern's boss, Old Sim, in Stone Alley is a top-notch rum brewer. The host has triggered a hidden mission. Please acknowledge Old Sim as your master and learn how to brew rum. Mission reward, proficiency in brewing. You will also be able to learn 3 new types of brewing techniques. Mission penalty, alcohol allergy constitution. Mission time limit, complete within 3 days. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly appeared in Meg's mind. Learn how to brew rum. Meg was slightly taken aback. This mission was rather unique. After thinking for a while, he curiously asked, "System, can I learn how to brew any type of alcohol? Including Mao Tai or Ergotu?" "Yes." You can choose 3 types of alcohol. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, and smiled as he mumbled to himself, if ergotu can be learned, I have a new idea. The next morning, Meg hung a notice at the door. Going out to gather ingredients. Closed for a few days. After that, he led everyone in the restaurant to follow the orcs from the Fok tribe, and left on their flying steeds. Chapter 1524. Grey Temple. Roland put away the secret letter in his hand, and said to Burton, give him the highest level of authority. Let all the informants in the Twilight Forest cooperate with him. Protect him and his entourage as much as possible. Yes. Burton nodded, and turned to leave. The demons in the Boundless Sea realm are still in a mess. I wonder what kind of trouble this couple can stir up in the Twilight Forest. I'm really looking forward to it, Burton murmured to himself as he walked to the window. Fuck. Without any warning, Mr. Mac went out to get ingredients again. I ran half the city just to come here to eat soy milk and youtiao, but it's closed. At the entrance of Amy's, the customers looked at the signboard hanging on the door, and instantly lamented. Humph. Such an irresponsible boss. Even if he comes back with a new product, I will never, is it really delicious? I will never, eat less. Everyone comforted each other, and could only leave helplessly. What could they do? Delicious new products always needed to be patiently waited. This had already become some kind of consensus. Father, do we really not need to apply for leave from Master? Will they be very angry? Amy asked curiously as she lay in Meg's arms. However, she did not look worried at all. It's okay. I've already asked the delivery man to send the leave request to the school. Master Crassus should have received it by now. Meg said with a smile. As he had applied for leave too many times, he was really embarrassed to meet Crassus. Hence, he asked Connie to send a leave request before they left. He was making the best use of everything. Then, will she get lost? Amy asked worriedly. Chaos School is such an easy place to find. It shouldn't be that bad, right? Meg raised his eyebrows. But the Bawtai prison is just next door. She still got lost, Amy said. This. Meg was speechless. That old man said that Chaos School is this road ahead, then turn left, then right. In that case, won't we turn back? Should I turn left first? Connie stood at the entrance of an alley, deep in thought. This was already the 15th person she had asked. Unfortunately, it seemed that she was getting further and further away from Chaos School. However, she was clearly following the directions of those passers-by, so why was she getting more and more off track? Those guys must have pointed me in the wrong direction. I obviously trusted them so much. Connie stomped her foot angrily, and darted into the alley on the right without any hesitation. She had planned to take a flying steed out of the west gate after delivering the request for leave for her boss, but the problem now was that not only was she unable to find Chaos School, but she also didn't know how to get to the west side of the city. Sigh, why did I take in such a person who can't even find the north as my disciple? I even wanted to train her into an assassin. On top of the wall, Lex sighed deeply and looked at the sky. The giant black eagle had a wingspan of more than 50 meters. There were several rows of chairs fixed on the eagle's back, allowing the rider to sit comfortably and enjoy the journey. The windshield that came with it also blocked out the cold wind, making the winter journey less cold. Apart from Raina, almost all the members of Amy's were on the trip to the Twilight Forest. Of course, Camilla chose to go alone because of her status and reputation. She would contact them secretly when she reached the Fok tribe. Phyrus had to stay behind to train more elf chefs for the night elves, so she didn't go either. The empty spot that she left behind was filled by Irina, who had disguised herself. Mia, Elizabeth, Barbara, Gina, Anna, Meg, Amy, and Irina. The 8 of them and a fat cat were going to the Twilight Forest to cause trouble. Apart from the beast tamers, the Fog Tribe's ambassador, Clower, was also on the eagle's back. The Black Eagle took off, and soon left Chaos City. Clower, who was sitting in the front row, also stood up with an unfriendly expression. He looked at the ladies with his cross-eyed eyes, and an evil smile appeared on his face unknowingly. "Hey, mister, your saliva is dripping," Amy reminded him kindly. "Ha, little imp, call me Lord Clower," Clower said coldly as he glared at Amy. After that, he looked at everyone with an arrogant expression and said, "Let me tell you, Chaos City's rules don't apply outside the city. The Fog Tribe has its own rules. From now on, you have to serve me well. You will only have a chance to go back alive if I'm satisfied. Otherwise," Clower chuckled. Although he didn't finish his sentence, he had already said everything. Meg looked at Clower with pity. Who gave him the courage to say something like that? One had to know that even Amy could throw him off 100 times on the eagle's back now. Everyone was also looking at Clower with confusion. These fellows aren't following the plot. The eerie silence and everyone's baffled gazes made Clower, who was prepared to face everyone's fearful expressions and immediately kneel down to suck up to him, freeze. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Let me tell you. I'm the real boss on this eagle's back now. All of you, stand up right now, meow." Ugly Duckling suddenly jumped out from Amy's arms, and gave Clower a roundhouse kick with its hind leg. Clower was caught off guard, and was kicked back a few steps by Ugly Duckling. He sat on the ground, and his face was even scratched by its sharp claws. Ugly Duckling turned around and glanced at Clower with disdain. Then, it walked back to Amy with elegant cat-like steps, and meowed at her as if it was asking for praise. Then, it rubbed its head against her calf. This comical scene made everyone burst into laughter. "Uncle, even Ugly Duckling doesn't admit what you said," Amy said to Clower with a smile. You damned bastard. I'm going to kill you." Clower glared at Ugly Duckling furiously, and a short knife appeared in his hand. "Lord Clower, that's a holy beast. You can't hurt it. You can't hurt it." The beast master at the side quickly pulled Clower back, and looked at Ugly Duckling with respect. Clower looked at Ugly Duckling, and his expression changed. In the end, he kept the knife angrily, and his gaze landed on Meg. He coldly said, "I order you to let them serve me. We were invited to the Twilight Forest to prepare a banquet for the conferring ceremony of the new chief of the Fog Tribe. There's nothing about serving anyone." Meg smiled at Clower. "Who do you think you are?" Chapter 15:25. Why you? I. Clower glared at Meg as if he couldn't believe that Meg dared to speak to him like that. What right did he have to be so arrogant in front of him after leaving Chaos City? What made him even more displeased was that the beauties didn't react to his warning and command at all. "Don't be nervous, Uncle. Just say whatever you want to say before you go down," Amy said with a smile. "We won't help you pass on your last words." Irina glanced at Clower and calmly said, "So, cut the crap. It's useless anyway." Klaus choked, but he soon laughed coldly. He untied a long whip from his waist and cracked his neck. He looked at everyone and said, "It seems that if I don't make you suffer, you won't be able to figure out who's in charge here." Mia and the rest all looked at Meg. They were going to the Fog Tribe to save Connie's brother. Whether they were going to endure this fellow's humiliation depended on Meg's plan. "Father, is there still any use for this baddie to stay?" Amy asked Meg as she looked up at him. "He's not as useful as this stupid eagle down there." Meg shook his head with a smile. Then, he's useless. Amy thought for a while before turning to Clower with a bright smile. Uncle, how do you want to land? I want to teach you a lesson, you sharp-tongued brat. Clower raised the long whip in his hand, and was about to lash it at Amy. Since that's the case, I'll have to help you choose a fancy spiral face landing, Amy said seriously. She tapped the eagle's back with the tip of her foot, and the giant eagle, which was flying steadily, suddenly sank a little. Amy's petite figure shot out, and did a spin in midair. Her right leg kicked Clower's face in the same way and angle as Ugly Duckling. Clower's eyes widened, and a horrified expression appeared on his ugly face. Then, he quickly deformed under that petite foot. He had only just raised the whip in his hand. Whoosh! Crow disappeared from the eagle's back almost instantly, falling head first like a spinning top. The giant eagle was about 300 meters above the ground. About 10 seconds later, a muffled sound came from below, accompanied by the echoes of rocks falling down. Sir Crow! The beast tamer riding the giant eagle exclaimed. Phew! I wonder if that batty uncle is doing well. Amy landed lightly on the eagle's back and looked down. His life force is slowly weakening. He won't be able to live for much longer, Irina glanced down and said calmly. Little me has once again maintained world peace. Meg also calmly gave her a thumbs up. He couldn't be bothered to suck up to that fellow during the journey, and it was even more impossible for him to get Irina and the rest to serve him. As Gary's insignificant confidant and a participant in the riot, getting rid of him before they reached the Falk tribe wouldn't affect the progress of the plan. When they reached the Falk tribe, they could just find a random reason to brush him off. That beast tamer looked at Meg and the rest in shock and fear, and said with a trembling voice, You killed Sir Crow. He fell down himself. You should have seen it with your own eyes. Meg stood up and looked at that beast tamer with a smile. Isn't that so? The beast tamer shuddered, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He looked at Meg as if he was looking at the devil, and nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes. I saw it. It was Sir Crow. He jumped down himself. Meg still had a smile on his face. He nodded slightly, and said, We are going to continue to the Falk tribe now. Can you bring us there? Yes. I will definitely be able to bring all of you to the Falk tribe before nightfall. The beast tamer quickly nodded. Very good. Let's continue then. Meg nodded. Yes. The beast tamer quickly turned back, and focused on speeding up the giant eagle. He didn't even dare to look back. Irina glanced at Meg. Meg shook his head slightly, and gestured for her to calm down. Without Crow, the beast tamer had completely become a tool. The atmosphere on the giant eagle became more relaxed, and it almost became a group outing for Amy's. Meg even took out the kitchenware, and started to cook in the sky. In the twilight forest. In a magnificent and tall stone hall, a tall orc with a conspicuous scar on his right eyebrow was sitting on the main seat. He looked at the orcs standing below with their heads lowered with a gloomy expression, and said, You still haven't caught that last Connie? Chief, we have searched the entire Twilight Forest, and sent many people to look for her in Chaos City, but we still haven't found any traces of her. According to our judgment, she might have already died on the way. After all, she is famous for having no sense of direction. It's impossible for her to reach Chaos City successfully, a fat orc said. Yes, Chief. She doesn't know magic, and she's not good at cultivation. Even if she's still alive, she can't affect your powerful position, much less have the ability to influence the conferring ceremony. If she dares to appear at the conferring ceremony, we can even execute her and her brother together to completely stop those fellows from thinking about her, another tall and thin orc said. Gary, who was sitting on the high seat, was silent for a while. The corners of his lips twitched, and he revealed a sinister smile. Then, let's spread the news. I want to see if she will walk right into the trap for her dear brother and the few remaining family members she has left. Yes, the 3 orcs answered at the same time, and heaved a sigh of relief. How are the preparations for the conferring ceremony? All the orc tribes will send envoys to attend my conferring ceremony this time. We have to ensure that nothing goes wrong, and we don't embarrass me, Gary continued to ask. The venue for the conferring ceremony has already been arranged according to the specifications of the August tribe's chief Oster's conferring ceremony. I have already sent Clower to Chaos City to invite Chef Meg from Amy's to be the chef for the banquet on that day. He should be on his way now, the fat orc quickly answered. A chef from Chaos City. Gary frowned. Yes. That chef won the title of the best chef at the Roth Empire's royal banquet. He is one of the best chefs in the world right now. There will definitely be no problem with him hosting the banquet, the fat orc said with a smile. The fat chef said with a bashful smile. This was the information he had gathered after much effort. It was not easy to find such a good chef. All of you will be rewarded once the matter is settled. Gary's gaze swept past those orcs who were already smiling in surprise, and he coldly said, "You know what will happen if you mess it up." Yes. The 3 orcs replied quickly, and shuddered at the same time. Chapter 15:26. The journey to the Twilight Forest was long. Although the giant eagle's flying speed wasn't slow, it was only a 3rd-tier magic beast, after all. Hence, a tribe built in the canyon only appeared in everyone's sight when the sun was setting in the west. The canyon was very wide, and the tribe was built at the mouth of the canyon. 2 100-meter-tall stone pillars stood at the mouth of the canyon, and there were countless caves of various sizes on them. Stone houses of various sizes were scattered all over the canyon, and in the center of the canyon was a square stone city. The city walls were over 10 meters tall, and there were many magnificent stone temples in the city. On the way here, Irina had altered part of the Beastmaster's memory. She erased the scene where Amy got Klaus off the bird's back, and replaced it with the part where he had something to do and couldn't return to the tribe. That Beastmaster was just an ordinary orc. For a magic caster like Irina, it was a piece of cake for her to do such a thing. Furthermore, it could save her a lot of trouble in explaining. Sirs, the Falk tribe is right in front. The holy city in the center is where the chief and nobles live, and the outskirts are where the ordinary tribesmen live. The Beastmaster introduced with a smile. When they got closer to the canyon, he even lowered his voice, and said, "Those 2 stone pillars are where the holy beasts live. You must not make any noise when you pass by, lest you startle the holy beasts and cause them to attack. You have to know that the holy beasts of the Falk tribe are extremely ferocious. Once you are targeted by them, meow." Ugly Duckling suddenly jumped out of Amy's arms, and stood on the eagle's head as it howled into the sky. Right at this moment, pairs of eyes of different colors suddenly appeared in the black holes of various sizes on the 2 stone pillars. They started meowing at the same time as if they were replying to their king. What is that? The orcs on the ground all looked up when they heard the sound, and their gazes landed on the orange cat standing on the eagle's head. The reddish-gold sun shone on it, and it looked as if it was plated with a layer of gold, making it look exceptionally dazzling. The meowing of the cats on the 2 stone pillars made him look even more noble. Could this be the one in a million golden legend, the heavenly god beast? An old orc with white hair exclaimed agitatedly. He bent his knees, and knelt on the ground. Heavenly god beast. All of the orcs fell to their knees upon hearing that, and looked up at Ugly Duckling with fervent expressions. Are these cat slaves from the alternate world? Meg mumbled to himself as he looked at the orcs kneeling on the ground. Indeed, when there are no tigers in the mountains, the orange cat calls itself a god. And those fellows that were hailed as holy beasts were felines that hid in caves. There were all kinds of felines, and there was no lack of ferocious feline magical beasts among them. Why are these orcs so excited to see a fat duck? Amy looked down in confusion. This was the first time she had seen ugly ducklings so popular. That's because the ancient books say that everything should be based on the big orange, Meg said with a smile. Meow, ugly duckling turned to Amy with a smug expression as if it were showing off its popularity. Don't show off, ugly duckling. Look at you standing there. The little eagle's head is already swaying. Its neck is going to be broken by you, Amy said with disdain. The giant eagle's head was indeed swaying slightly unnaturally. No one knew if it was because it was frightened or because it couldn't bear the pressure. Meow, ugly duckling let out an aggrieved cry as it came down from the eagle's head. It returned to Amy's feet unwillingly, and rubbed its head against her calf before lying down on her feet. You must be an extraordinary person to be able to gain the favor and trust of a heavenly god beast. The beast tamer quickly started bootlicking. Ugly duckling's cry caused quite a commotion in the Falk tribe. Many orcs were attracted by the news of the so-called heavenly god beast's appearance, and came out to watch the show. However, the giant eagle glided over the canyon and landed in the inner city. The beast tamer stood next to the crouching giant eagle with a smile, and said to everyone, Mr. Meg and everyone else, this journey has come to an end. Thank you for riding with us. Please bring your luggage and belongings, and we look forward to riding with you again. Thank you. Meg nodded slightly, and brought everyone down from the giant eagle. Not far away, a fat orc was walking over with a group of people. From the information that Meg had obtained in advance, this orc was called Jerome. He was Gary's trusted subordinate and a 9th-tier orc. He was the one who opened the inner city gates on the day of the riot, and welcomed the rebel army into the city. This orc was one of the top on Meg's must-kill list. However, the Grey Temple relied on him to give them a legitimate identity to come here. Jerome's gaze first stopped on Meg, who was walking at the front, before he looked past him to the ladies in the restaurant. His eyes lit up instantly, and he revealed a perverted smile. He swept his gaze across everyone, and quickly frowned as he loudly said, "Where's Clower? Why don't I see him?" Lord Clower had something to do in Chaos City, and said he would be back later. He asked me to bring Mr. Meg and the rest back first, the beast tamer quickly replied. He lowered his head, and didn't dare to look Jerome in the eye. This bastard. How dare he neglect the mission I gave him? You, go and get him back here immediately. Jerome shouted coldly. Yes. That beast tamer's legs trembled as he got onto the giant eagle, and flew away immediately. Jerome's gaze landed on Meg, and he sized him up. He looked like an ordinary human, and asked, "You're Meg from Chaos City?" "Yes. I'm Meg. I was invited to host the conferring ceremony banquet for the new chief of the Falk tribe," Meg said in a neutral tone. "Are your dishes really that good? Even the king of the Roth Empire was full of praises for you." Jerome looked at Meg doubtfully. Could an ordinary human, and one that looked so young, really cook delicious food? He wasn't full of praises. Meg looked at Jerome with a smile, and said, "That's because the king of the Roth Empire only cared about eating, and didn't have time to praise me." Jerome's chubby face twitched. This fellow was really shameless when it came to praising himself. Very good. This banquet is very important. As long as you can satisfy the chief, you will definitely get all the benefits. Jerome looked at Meg, and took 2 steps closer to him. He lowered his voice, and said, "But if you mess it up, you will know what it means to live a life worse than death." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1527. I'm a chef with professional integrity. I'm paid to do my job, so I'll naturally do my best, Meg said with a smile. Very good. Jerome took a step back and glanced at the girls in the restaurant. He turned and left, instructing the orc beside him, take them to the main kitchen. Try to satisfy them if they have any requests. Remember, nothing is more important than tomorrow's banquet. Yes. The orc nodded and watched Jerome leave. He then turned to Meg and said, let's go. Follow me. Meg nodded slightly. He held Amy's hand and led the others to follow. If the valley outside the city was like a scattered orc tribe, then the inner city was more like a small but rather magnificent city. The ground was covered with smooth gray and black stone slabs. Neat black buildings were on both sides of the nearly 10-meter-wide road. The connected stone temples were all very tall. Statues and runes related to cats could be seen everywhere. This is really a tribe of cat slaves. Meg looked around and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He glanced at the right hand of the orc walking in front of him. He could see a black hemp rope on his raised wrist from time to time. He raised his eyebrows slightly and naturally looked away. The conferring ceremony was the grandest event in a tribe. The streets were filled with orcs who were decorating everywhere. All kinds of decorations decorated the main street, making it very lively. Meg and the others attracted the attention of many orcs, especially the beautiful girls. They were even more eye-catching. This is the chef in charge of tomorrow night's banquet. Behave yourselves. Behave yourselves, the orc walking in front said in a deep voice, making the orcs who had evil smiles on their faces step back. Hearing that it was related to the banquet, the orcs immediately dispersed. No one wanted to ruin the chief's good fortune. This was something that could cost them their lives. These people all have cat ears. Amy looked around curiously and whispered, compared to them, Sister Connie's pink ears do look much better. That's the symbol of nobility. Meg said softly with a smile. The Falk tribe's bloodline could be distinguished by the color of their ears. Black and gray were the most common, and also the most common. Meanwhile, pink ears would only appear on female orcs with royal bloodline. So that's the case. Amy nodded with a thoughtful expression. Her gaze then fell on Ugly Duckling's orange ears, and she curiously asked, then what is Ugly Duckling? The one and only orange ears. He's probably a heavyweight. Meg raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. Those feline magical beasts were behaving rather strangely toward Ugly Duckling. It was clearly only a few months old, but those magical beasts were all expressing their submission toward it. It appeared that Ugly Duckling was indeed a very special being. Oh. Amy nodded. She placed Ugly Duckling on the ground, and disdainfully said, no wonder it was so troublesome. Meow meow, Ugly Duckling meowed aggrievedly as it looked at Amy with puppy eyes. Ha, then let me carry Ugly Duckling. It's so soft and warm when I carry it. Yabba Mia happily scooped Ugly Duckling up in front of her chest with a happy smile. Meow, Ugly Duckling also closed its eyes comfortably as it snuggled in Mia's arms. That orc seemed to have some status as he led them through all the levels, and finally stopped in front of a big courtyard. He turned around, and sternly said to Meg and the rest, this is the main kitchen. You have to stay here for today and the next 2 days. You're not allowed to leave as you wish. Otherwise, no one will guarantee your safety. Meg looked around with a smile, and asked, may I ask where is the most dangerous place in this city? To you, the most dangerous places are naturally the chief's palace in the south of the city and the prison in the north of the city. Don't go near these 2 places as you wish, that orc said even more sternly. In that case, let's do as we agreed. Meg nodded. The orc led them into the main kitchen. The courtyard was very spacious, and there were dozens of kitchens of various sizes on both sides. Many orcs were busily going in and out with ingredients or already prepared food in their hands. Looking at this scene, Meg was reminded of the imperial kitchen in the Rodu royal palace. It was just that the imperial kitchen was larger in scale, and there were also more chefs. However, their roles were the same. They had to provide food for many people at the same time. Wow, what a big kitchen! Are they going to provide food for the entire city? Amy looked around in amazement. Meg nodded and said, yes. This should be the kitchen for the entire city. That orc instructed the gatekeeper, and soon, a pot-bellied orc with a greasy face came over with a smile. He looked at that orc and said, Master Ken, you're here. That orc called Ken pointed at Meg and the others, and said, these are the chefs that Master Jerome personally invited from Chaos City. Mr. Meg and his assistants will be in charge of the most important main banquet tomorrow. You have to cooperate fully with them, and try your best to satisfy any requests they have. Yes, yes. The greasy orc nodded quickly, and smiled at Meg and the others. Arrange accommodations for them, and treat them with the highest level of courtesy, Ken said to Meg. Then, he turned to Meg, and said, Mr. Meg, the main kitchen will arrange dinner and accommodations for you. If you need anything, you can ask them to look for me. All right, thank you. Meg nodded slightly, and watched as Ken left. You're that Mr. Meg who won the Best Chef Award at the Roth Empire's Royal Banquet. I've been seeing news about you and your restaurant in magazines recently. I didn't expect to be able to invite you to host the main banquet this time. It's really an honor to meet you. That orc looked at Meg with glowing eyes, and didn't forget to introduce himself. I'm the person in charge of this main kitchen, Heyman. I'm in charge of the main kitchen, and I provide 3 meals for all the nobles in the inner city. Nice to meet you. Meg also greeted him with a smile. This round orc, who was at least 150 kilograms, didn't sound like he was trying to flatter him, nor was he trying to be arrogant. He was the first orc that Meg had a good impression of since he came to the Falk tribe. You must be tired from the long journey. Let me bring you to your accommodations first, and then I'll get the kitchen to prepare dinner for you. Heyman brought Meg and the others to their accommodations. There was an independent small courtyard next to the main kitchen. It wasn't luxurious, but it was still considered clean and elegant. There were 4 rooms, and Meg and the others could stay in them after they were allocated. After that, Heyman brought everyone back to the main kitchen, and walked towards the dining hall. Have you heard? Although the main kitchen is in charge of the banquet for the conferring ceremony this time, the main banquet is handled by an outsider. Our main kitchen has been abandoned, a short and skinny chef said in the dining hall. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1528. There's such a thing. His words immediately attracted the attention of many chefs who were eating. Our main kitchen has always been in charge of all the banquets in the tribe. How can the rules be changed so easily after so many years? There are so many great chefs in our main kitchen. How can they find someone better than us outside? A middle-aged chef said angrily. Instantly, there was a commotion of agreement. Their pride as chefs made it difficult for them to accept such an arrangement. What are you yelling about? Don't you know what you are capable of? If the things you made were really presentable, Master Jerome wouldn't have had to go through so much trouble to invite Mr. Meg from Chaos City. Heyman walked into the restaurant, and looked at all the chefs present with disappointment. He stepped aside to let Meg through, and continued, let me introduce him. This is Mr. Meg, the head chef from Mamis in Chaos City. He will be in charge of the main banquet for tomorrow's banquet. As to why we chose him. Because Mr. Meg's dishes won the Best Dish Award at the Roth Empire's Palace Banquet, and he has also received praises from many famous gourmets. Are you convinced? Heyman's gaze swept across all the chefs in the restaurant. The restaurant fell silent instantly. All the chefs looked at Meg with complicated gazes, and some resentment and indignation. Meg glanced at the restaurant. It seemed like no one had prepared dinner for them. He couldn't be bothered to argue with these peers, so he said, "Let's make dinner ourselves. May I know where the kitchen is that we can use?" "Mr. Meg, this way please. All your kitchenware has been moved to Kitchen 1. If you need to make dinner, I will bring you there," Heyman said with a smile as he led Meg out of the restaurant and towards Kitchen 1. "Let's go. Let's go take a look too. Let's see if this fellow is really so capable and how he can replace us." The short and skinny chef who started the incident put down his bowl and followed them out. "Let's go, let's all go take a look." All the chefs followed them out. The news of the arrival of Meg and the others had already spread throughout the kitchen. An outsider was going to replace their original position, which naturally caused quite a commotion. After hearing the news, more and more chefs gathered in kitchen number 1. They all wanted to see with their own eyes whether the invited chef was really that awesome. "Father, why do these chefs seem so unfriendly to us? Are they bad guys?" Amy asked in a low voice as she looked at the hostile chefs in bewilderment. "I'm not really a bad guy. Every chef has their own pride. If I can't convince them wholeheartedly, I'll make them feel uncomfortable." Meg shook his head with a smile. He could understand the reason behind the resentment of his peers. "I'm sorry, Mr. Meg. I didn't teach them well." Hyman turned her head and said with some embarrassment, "It's all right. As a chef, I can understand how they feel." Meg shook his head. Of course, understanding didn't mean that he had to spoil them. Kitchen number 1 was the largest kitchen in the main kitchen. It was also the most well-equipped and high-end kitchen. In addition to the original equipment, the kitchenware that Meg brought over had also been moved into the kitchen. However, many of the kitchenware were new to them, so they hadn't arranged them yet. Meg made sure that his kitchenware hadn't been lost during the transportation process. Then, he began to instruct Mia and the others to put the kitchenware in a comfortable position. "Is this the chef that you invited? He looks so young, just like an apprentice." "Yeah, he doesn't look like a chef who can make delicious food. Which old chef hasn't accumulated decades or even centuries of cooking skills? What can such a young human make? Is the kitchen a place where women can stay? He actually found a bunch of women to be his assistants. How extravagant. I'm just curious. How did the chef find so many beautiful ladies?" More and more chefs gathered inside and outside the main kitchen. They were discussing softly. Some were doubtful, some were jealous, and some were envious. Meg ignored those noisy voices calmly. He looked at Amy and asked, "Amy, what do you want to eat tonight?" "I want to eat grilled fish and braised pork," Amy said without hesitation. "What about the others? What else do you want to eat?" Meg turned to look at the crowd and asked. "I want to eat eggplant with garlic sauce," Mia said. "I want to eat beggar's chicken," Gina said softly. "Actually, I don't really want to eat beef kebabs either," Barbara said with a proud look. "All right, give me a moment. I'll make dinner," Meg said with a smile. He took out various ingredients from the fridge and began to cook. The chefs present gradually quieted down. Their gazes fell on Meg. Meg began to prepare the ingredients first. He washed, processed, and cut them. His series of actions flowed smoothly. Although he was doing it alone, his efficiency was very high. He was busy but not messy. This made the other chefs look at him differently. Efficiency was important in the main kitchen. Different chefs were responsible for different processes. Although these were all very basic tasks, one could see a chef's basic skills from the details. The uniform knife patterns on the fish, the evenly sized pieces of meat, and the various trimmed side dishes made the chefs who were in charge of the trimming shut their mouths. Phyllis stayed in Chaos City, and Camilla didn't go with them. Hence, Meg could only do the trimming work himself. Meg put the braised pork into the pot to stew first. Then, he put the processed grilled fish into the oven. After that, he put the beggar's chicken that was covered in yellow mud into the oven to grill at high temperature. After that, he started to skewer the meat and prepare the beef kebabs. Why did he put the fish into that square container? What kind of kitchenware is that? Is he sure he doesn't need to heat it up? He wrapped the chicken in mud. Is he sure that it's still edible? It looks very dirty. How can a delicacy that's served to the distinguished guests be so dirty? If it's just stewing meat, there are many chefs in our main kitchen who can make a dish of this standard. It's cut into such big pieces. The nobles eat delicately. After Meg started to cook, the chef started to talk more. Meg's strange cooking method attracted a bunch of senior chefs' online comments. They couldn't hide their disdain in their words. These fellows are really noisy. Irina pursed her lips after she found a high stool from somewhere and glanced at those chefs. Do we need them to shut their mouths? Amy rubbed her palms together, eager to try. Only real delicacies can conquer chefs. Meg shook his head with a smile. He placed the skewers on the already lit charcoal grill. Ding! Right at this moment, the oven's notification that the food was done sounded. Meg put on a pair of thick gloves, and pulled open the oven door. The rich aroma of the spicy grilled fish wafted out instantly. Chapter 1529. The door of the oven opened, and the spicy aroma filled kitchen 1 immediately. It smells so good. The eyes of the chefs in the kitchen lit up. I can smell the spiciness, but I can't resist the aroma. I didn't expect the aroma to become so strong after putting a fish in this square container for such a short time. What kind of magical artifact is this? This is grilled fish. But why don't I see the grill and charcoal fire? How did this fish get grilled? And how did it make the aroma so rich and delicious? Gulp. The aroma of the grilled fish spread, and caused an uproar and gasp. This aroma was so irresistible that even the old chefs who had been in the kitchen for decades couldn't resist it. Of course, what surprised them even more was Meg's cooking method, and this aroma that completely subverted their imagination of grilled fish. It was so invasive. This aroma. Heyman was astonished. He looked at Meg's back with admiration as he muttered in his heart, as expected of the man who won the Best Chef award at the Roth Kingdom's royal banquet where all the famous chefs gathered. Let's put it over there first. Meg took the grilled fish out of the oven, and placed it on the charcoal fire that was already prepared at the side. There were all kinds of vegetables and hot pot noodles under it. Putting it on the fire and grilling it for a while would make the grilled fish more flavorful, and the vegetables were an essential part of grilled fish. Many of the orc chefs present had already swallowed their saliva many times as they looked at the grilled fish that was gurgling on the fire. It looks like grilled fish, but why is there soup in this grilled fish? Shouldn't grilled fish be better as it dries? A chef questioned softly with a puzzled look on his face. This is an unprofessional grilled fish. A real grilled fish is supposed to be crispy and fragrant. This kind of soup doesn't deserve to be called grilled fish at all. A plump old chef pursed his lips in disdain. He was the chef in charge of grilling fish in the main kitchen. His words immediately attracted the agreement of many orc chefs. This was not in line with their knowledge. Meg walked to the fire, and started to stir-fry the eggplant with garlic sauce. This dish was the simplest among all the dishes made tonight. The spices were stir-fried in the iron wok, and the overflowing aroma soon attracted the chef's attention. Stir-frying was not common in this world. Humans were used to stewing their food, while orcs preferred to roast their food. It was the first time for many of the chefs present to see vegetables being cut so delicately and then stir-fried in a strange-looking iron wok. What made them even more confused was that they couldn't tell what kind of spices Meg had put into the pot. The aroma of the meat was so rich that it didn't lose out to the roasted fish from before. The eggplant was put into the wok and stir-fried. Not long after, the softened eggplant was wrapped in a layer of thick red sauce and served on a plate. It looked and smelled good. After handing the eggplant with garlic sauce to Mia, Meg turned around and turned off the fire in the high-pressure stew. He pressed the button to reduce the pressure and poured the braised pork into the black stone pot. The rich aroma of the meat wafted out. The orcs were very familiar with the aroma of pork, but no one could make the aroma of pork so rich and enticing. Oh my God! Although I don't know what he's cooking, I've never seen such an enticing aroma in my life, a young chef couldn't help but say softly as he swallowed his saliva. The aroma is so enticing, the taste must be good. That's what my master taught me, an apprentice nodded in agreement. No. Shut up. It's not me, a middle-aged chef behind him said with a red face. Although they didn't want to admit it, the enticing aroma that filled kitchen number 1 made many of the orc chefs who came to watch the show change their opinion of Meg. As chefs, they naturally understood how difficult it was to make food have such an enticing aroma. There was no reason why food with such an enticing aroma wouldn't taste good. Everyone looked at Meg with a complicated expression. A young human chef with countless halos and titles, a chef who was invited by the chief to be in charge of the main banquet, was the man in front of them. Even an ordinary banquet could be made with such delicious and enticing food. Mia took out the beggar's chicken whose shell was roasted golden red from the oven and placed it on a tray. She took out the small hammer that she always carried with her and lightly knocked on the center of the mud shell. Fine cracks instantly covered the entire eggshell. Then, with a crisp cracking sound, the eggshell opened up like a lotus flower, revealing the golden beggar's chicken within. The mud and chicken are perfectly separated, just like an eggshell. I didn't expect there to be such a magical method of roasting chicken in this world. I didn't expect roasting chicken with yellow mud to be so delicious. I'm going to try it later. The aroma of each dish is different, but they're all equally enticing. This guy is too showy, isn't he? The aroma of the roasted chicken spread out and caused a commotion again. The doubts gradually disappeared. Even the most old-fashioned old chefs didn't have the courage to say anything provocative when surrounded by such an enticing aroma. Manager Hyman, have you eaten dinner? Do you want to have some together? Meg asked with a smile as he looked at Hyman, who was secretly swallowing his saliva at the side. I've been too busy today. I just realized that I haven't eaten dinner. Burp. Hyman covered his mouth and smiled awkwardly. I haven't eaten dinner, and I'm burping from hunger. If Mr. Meg and the ladies don't mind, then I'll be thick-skinned and eat a little. Uncle Hyeel, you have to do as you say. If you say it's a little tasty, then just eat a little. Don't eat too much. Otherwise, we'll all starve. Amy said to Hyman with a serious expression. Her little face carried traces of worry. I'm Hyman, not CEO. Hyman corrected her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He had long heard of this harmless and adorable little ancestor. She was the precious disciple of the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire. She was a genius magus, and her status was much higher than her father's. Even the Fog tribe wasn't willing to bear the wrath of those two legendary magic casters. I'll restrain myself. Hyman nodded seriously. Actually, he had already eaten dinner. It was just that the aroma was too alluring, and the chance to taste Mag's culinary skills without leaving the Fog tribe was simply too precious. Even if he only had one bite of each dish, he didn't want to miss this opportunity. There was a set of table and chairs in the corner of kitchen number 1. Meg couldn't be bothered to bring the dishes to the dining room, so he just ate in the kitchen. Everyone sat around the table. Hyman got someone to bring a small stool over, and sat down carefully at the corner of the table. "Let's eat." Meg picked up the bowl, and took a mouthful of steaming white rice. He felt the soft rice become more fragrant and sweet as he chewed, and his mood improved. This grilled fish. Hyman picked up his chopsticks, and stared at the grilled fish in the pot. The chef's gazes also landed on Hyman. The color, aroma, and taste were all present. As for the taste, they would have to wait for Hyman's taste test. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1530. Hyman had been in this big kitchen his whole life. He entered the kitchen when he was 11, and only touched a cleaver for the first time when he was 18. After that, he spent 30 years to become the head chef of kitchen number 1. After that, he stayed in the big kitchen for another 100 years, and took over the position of the supervisor from his master. He stayed there for 120 years. He had to eat every day, and the chief and nobles had very high expectations of him. There couldn't be any mistakes. The lives of the hundreds of chefs in the big kitchen depended on him. Entering the big kitchen was equivalent to entering a prison. Unless he died one day, or was no longer favored by the chief, he could only get out of here. In order to satisfy the ever-changing tastes of the chief and nobles, Hyman had always been trying to come up with some innovation so that he wouldn't be eliminated because he got sick of them. All the slightly famous chefs in the Falk tribe were in the big kitchen. Furthermore, Hyman had also gathered many chefs from various tribes in the Twilight Forest. However, because they were close to each other, the dishes they made were similar, and there wasn't much of a reference value. Therefore, gourmet magazines became an important channel for Hyman to get inspiration and trends in the culinary world. And Mamie's was undoubtedly the darling of the gourmet magazines recently. Whether it was the eggplant with garlic sauce that made vegetarianism rise to the top of the magazines again, or the red braised pork that made Mamie's shine in the carnivorous magazine, Mamie's had already made a name for herself in the culinary world. Furthermore, many gourmets were either on their way to Mamie's, or were planning to go there. There weren't many chefs in this world who could make people yearn for her creative cooking method just by describing it in words. Furthermore, Hyman even heard that the legend of the culinary world, the invincible god of cookery, Harris, had lost to Mamie's Meg in Chaos City just a few days ago. He even acknowledged him as his master according to their agreement. This made Hyman very shocked. One had to know that his idol before this was Harris. That man who had always been at the forefront of innovation and challenging the peak actually fell in Chaos City. This was something the whole world didn't expect. And the man who did all this was sitting in front of him now. He even made a table full of dishes, and invited him to have a meal with him. To be honest, other than being excited, he was also a little nervous. When the fragrant fish meat was placed before her, one could see the browned fish skin and tender flesh. Hyman stared at it carefully for a while, as though she was staring at a precious treasure. Even the best grilled fish master would find it extremely difficult to separate two completely different tastes from a single piece of fish skin. Such control and skill was truly astonishing. The head of the house has a tricky tongue. Will this grilled fish satisfy him? Back then, the head of the house started his apprenticeship from the grilled fish position in kitchen number 1. In our Falk tribe, or even the entire Twilight Forest, there isn't a chef who can grill fish as well as him. You can say that. No one knows how to roast fish better than him, not even this guy. The chefs in the kitchen were discussing in low voices, but their expressions and eyes were inevitably a little nervous and expectant. As for Hyman, who was being watched by everyone, she had already completely ignored the surrounding noises as she placed the piece of fish into her mouth. The numbness and spiciness instantly exploded on the tip of Hyman's tongue, causing her tongue to involuntarily tremble. It was a soul-shaking feeling. What kind of perfume was this? It was so miraculous. However, before Hyman could analyze and feel it in detail, the delicious fish meat had already appeared. The fragrant fish skin was bitten open, and the flesh of the fish was exceptionally fresh and tender. The taste of the spices and sauce had already slowly seeped into the fish as it was cooked over the charcoal fire. The combination of the spiciness and freshness was so ingenious that it made the taste buds feel as though they were welcoming a wave of deliciousness. He was indeed the one who grilled the best fish in their village, tribe, and even the entire forest. When he was young, he used to think that no one in this world could grill fish as delicious as his. He had only gotten rid of his addiction to grilling fish all these years, but he still thought so in his heart. Until today. This mouthful of grilled fish made him completely fall into the ground. Even as an old chef who had been grilling fish for over 200 years, and had been constantly trying to innovate and improve, he had to admit that this was the most delicious grilled fish he had ever tasted. This revolutionary way of grilling fish actually combined grilled fish and stewed fish so perfectly, and it even gave off an exceptionally mesmerizing spark. Rip, an unexpected tearing sound could be heard. Hyman's clothes were actually torn apart, and her fat jiggled a few times. Ah! What an unbelievable taste! It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call this the most delicious grilled fish in the world. Hyman praised. He looked at the grilled fish as if he was looking at a sparkling gem. He couldn't help but reach out with his chopsticks to pick up another piece of fish and put it into his mouth. This time, he closed his eyes and carefully savored the wonderful taste blossoming on the tip of his tongue. A blissful smile involuntarily appeared at the corner of his mouth. Enjoying such delicacies was indeed a blissful thing. Furthermore, Hyman was also eager to try this innovative way of grilling fish. A small stove had changed the way the grilled fish was eaten. Furthermore, he finally understood the reason for the tragedy of Harris becoming a disciple that shocked the entire culinary world. That was because he really wanted to become Meg's disciple right now. Such a delicious grilled fish couldn't be learned anywhere else, all right? The manager actually gave such a high evaluation. The most delicious grilled fish in the world. Does this mean that the manager has already admitted that his grilled fish isn't as delicious as this fellow's? There was an uproar inside and outside kitchen number 1. All the chefs were stunned. As the authoritative existence in the grilled fish world and the creator of the Twilight Forest's grilled fish operation guide, Hyman, who had always been picky with his tastes, actually gave such an evaluation. It was hard to imagine how delicious that grilled fish was. Meanwhile, the chefs standing in the front row secretly swallowed their saliva countless times as they watched Hyman, who was tasting the grilled fish blissfully. Uncle Hyman, you can also try the vegetables inside the grilled fish. They're super delicious too, Amy suggested. Sure. Hyman replied in a straightforward manner. Her gaze fell upon the side dishes on the sides of the grilled fish. There were cucumber strips, translucent vermicelli, and some unknown side dishes that had been sliced into thin slices with many small holes in the middle. After pondering for a moment, she picked up a piece of vermicelli. The slippery vermicelli almost slid into his mouth. After being soaked in the gravy, the slightly chewy vermicelli also became extraordinarily delicious. It was spicy and refreshing, leaving a lingering fragrance in his mouth. Hyman tried his best to control his hands. He put down his chopsticks, stood up, and said to Meg, "Mr. Meg's culinary skills amaze me. It's undoubtedly the best choice for you to be in charge of the main banquet." "You flatter me," Meg said humbly. "I have another question, but I'm not sure if I should ask." Go ahead. May I know if you are still taking in disciples? The kind that is a little old. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1531. He was most afraid of the sudden silence in the air, and most afraid of his peers suddenly acknowledging him as their master. Meg looked at the sincere and hopeful Haman, as well as the surrounding chefs who were all staring at him in shock, and shook his head decisively. No, an old one is enough. Sigh. Haman sighed regretfully. He seemed to be a little disheartened by Meg's rejection. The chefs present all heaved a sigh of relief. Many of them were Haman's disciples and grand-disciples. It would be weird if such a young grandmaster suddenly appeared above them. However, everyone was looking at Meg in a completely different light now. It was imaginable how good Meg's culinary skills were for Haman to want to acknowledge him as his master. Although I am a little old, and look a little plump, my brain is actually quite fast. Why don't you consider it again? Haman was still a little unwilling to give up. We will be returning to Chaos City after the banquet tomorrow. If you really want to learn how to roast fish, come to Chaos City to look for me. I can teach you. Meg was still shaking his head with a smile, but he made a promise. Really? Haman's eyes lit up, but he soon sighed again. He probably couldn't leave the main kitchen anymore. Even if he really wanted to learn how to roast fish from Meg, he probably couldn't do it. Since that's the case, please enjoy your meal. We won't disturb you anymore. A smile quickly appeared on Haman's face again, and he chased all the chefs who were squeezed in kitchen 1 out, leaving only Meg and the rest for dinner. Irina waved her hand to set up a soundproof barrier, and put a piece of red braised pork into her mouth. She chewed and swallowed, and then ate a mouthful of rice. Only then did she ask Meg, "Are we taking action tonight? We need to wait for Connie to meet up with us first before we take action together." "However, I need to go out tonight to look for someone," Meg said. Look for someone. Everyone looked at Meg. Could it be that he had someone he knew in the Falk tribe? Yes, an important person. Perhaps he can change the situation to a certain extent. Meg nodded. It was really difficult to explain the system's quest, so he didn't say much. "Father, can you bring me along?" Amy asked expectantly. "Not tonight." Meg shook his head and looked at the pouting Amy. He smiled and patted her head, saying, "Because Father needs Amy's help with something more important." Amy's eyes lit up again, and she asked expectantly, "What is it?" "Just tell me, and I'll definitely get it done. I'll talk to you later." Meg smiled. He turned to look at everyone and said, "According to the intelligence, Connie's brother is locked up in the dungeon in the chief's palace. There are at least 2 10th-tier powerhouses in that palace. It's obviously not an easy thing to rescue him under their watch, they're just 2 low-tier 10th-tier orcs. Isn't it just saving someone? I think it's quite simple." Irina looked at Meg with a relaxed expression. "Why don't we do it after dinner? There are 4 10th-tier powerhouses in the Falk tribe, including Gary. The coronation ceremony is tomorrow, and most of them are in the inner city now. If we act rashly, not only might we not be able to rescue Connie's brother, we might even get ourselves into trouble." Meg shook his head and looked at Irina helplessly. "Let's wait for Connie to come first. Otherwise, even if we see her brother, it won't be easy to take him away." "I hope her brother will be more normal," Irina said with pursed lips. According to the intelligence, although Gary had already carried out several rounds of cleansing in the Falk tribe, and most of the orcs who were close to the former chief were killed or imprisoned, there were still many people in the Falk tribe who didn't really stand on Gary's side because the former chief was very generous and had won the hearts of the people. With Irina around, killing Gary wasn't a difficult thing. However, killing him wouldn't solve the Falk tribe's current problem. The August tribe could totally support another puppet to control the Falk tribe, and then influence the entire orc race. Connie was the princess of the Fok tribe, after all. If she and her brother could regain power and control the Fok tribe, they would be able to get the Fok tribe out of the August tribe's control and stand on the anti-war side. I can be in charge of scouting and infiltrating. The night is my veil, Camilla said to Meg as she suddenly appeared at the dining table and sat down. You're more reliable than that killer who has no sense of direction, Meg agreed with Camilla. The Grey Temple's intelligence didn't tell him exactly where Connie's brother was locked up. They only guessed that he was in a few prisons and secret dungeons under the chief's palace. Before they officially started the rescue operation, it was indeed necessary for them to have a deeper understanding. Then, what do we need to do? Mia asked. Barbara, Elizabeth, and the rest also looked at Meg. All of you just need to rest well tonight. We have to appear more professional so that we won't be suspected easily, Meg said with a smile. The more people there were, the easier it was to be exposed. After dinner, Meg talked to Camilla alone for a while, and gave her a map with a few possible locations marked for her to check. Did Connie mark these for you? Camilla looked at Meg suspiciously as she held the map. No, I spent money to buy some information, but I'm not sure if it's accurate. Meg shook his head. Camilla left with the map, and Meg brought the girls back to the courtyard that he had arranged for them after they cleaned up the kitchen. Ever since they arrived at the inner city, Meg felt a spiritual power staring at them. It was a level 6 or level 6 ability. It wasn't very powerful, but it was enough to keep an eye on them. Do we need to erase it? Irina asked with a frown as she looked in the direction that she sensed. No need. Let him keep an eye on us. He's blind anyway. Meg shook his head with a smile, and closed the courtyard door. As the night got darker, a black shadow suddenly flashed out of the courtyard and out of the high wall, and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. About 3 minutes later, Meg appeared outside the city. He hid in the shadows of the houses, and walked quickly. Soon, he arrived at an alley that was covered with small stones. This should be the place, right? Meg walked into the alley, and soon smelled a strong alcohol aroma. It was the smell of rum. Following the aroma, Meg quickly arrived at a rather spacious courtyard. He could smell the strong alcohol aroma even through the courtyard wall. It was a pleasant aroma, the aroma of rum. Meg raised his hand, and was about to knock on the door. Which little bitch's house is this? Irina appeared on the courtyard wall, and asked him with a smile. A master brewer. I want to learn how to brew rum from him. Meg looked up at Irina, shrugged, and said innocently. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1532. Are you sure you're here to learn how to brew wine? Irina looked back at the courtyard with a dangerous smile. Yes. Meg nodded with certainty. What else could she do apart from learning how to brew wine in the middle of the night? Very good. I'll watch you learn. Irina nodded, and gestured for Meg to knock on the door. What's going on? Is there something wrong with this courtyard? Meg couldn't help but feel suspicious when he saw Irina's behavior. He went up and knocked on the door according to the secret signal given to him by the Grey Temple. Huh, you even said a secret signal. Irina laughed coldly. It's an occupational disease, an occupational disease. Actually, it's my first time here too. Meg smiled awkwardly. He actually forgot to pay attention to the details. Meg took 2 steps back, and waited quietly for the commotion in the courtyard. He just didn't know if old Sim slept early like other old people, or if he was a drunkard. If that was the case, it would be troublesome. The system's mission was very important. Secondly, Meg wanted to obtain some useful information from old Sim. Although he had already obtained a lot of information from the Grey Temple, including a secret letter before he left this morning, it would be a good idea to have a guide. However, it would be best if there was a guide in the local area. It would save a lot of time to verify the information. Meg waited for a while, and was about to knock on the door again. Right at this moment, the courtyard's door suddenly opened inwards, and a figure dashed out of the courtyard with a gust of fragrant wind. Then, she hugged Meg tightly. Meg felt two soft lumps collide into his chest, and then he was hugged tightly. "You're finally here. I thought you didn't want me anymore." A soft and aggrieved voice was heard as if it was an abandoned girl. "What's going on?" Meg didn't know if it was because the hug was too warm and soft, or because he was shocked by the sudden words, but he was stunned for a full 3 seconds. When he heard the faint sneer and murderous intent, he suddenly came back to his senses. He hurriedly released the hands that were tightly hugging him and took 2 steps back. "Miss, you must have mistaken me for someone else." Meg glanced at Irina, who looked calm on the surface but whose eyes were filled with killing intent, and hurriedly said. With the help of the lantern by the door, he could clearly see the appearance of the girl who had rushed out earlier. She was a girl wearing a dark green dress. She was tall and voluptuous, and her brown hair was tied into a ponytail that was casually draped over her left shoulder. She had snow-white skin and an exquisite face. Her purple eyes sparkled as she stared at Meg, as though she was a young wife who had seen her husband for a long time. Meg was sure that he didn't know this beautiful girl. He couldn't find any information related to her in his memory, so the only possibility was that this girl had mistaken him for someone else. Meg's face darkened. What the fuck is this? He really only wanted to learn how to brew wine. Because he was pressed for time, he could only come here at this time. Now, a girl ran out the moment he knocked on the door, and even threw herself at him like this. It would be fine if Irina wasn't here. They could just explain things clearly. But now, wasn't it just a show of an adulterous couple having a secret rendezvous in the middle of the night, and being caught red-handed by the wife? He wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Meg felt that the sword was already hanging over his head. If he was the slightest bit careless, he would be screwed. However, this was the rendezvous point given to him by the Grey Temple. Perhaps this girl was related to Old Sim. Mistaken? How could I be mistaken? Haven't I been waiting here day and night for you to knock on my door again? The girl looked at Meg with tears in her eyes. She felt wronged and sad. I've waited for you for so long. How could you be so heartless? For a moment, Meg even felt like he was a scumbag who abandoned an innocent girl and left her alone in an empty room. However, the murderous aura in the air quickly calmed him down. After he calmed down, he panicked even more. The more he tried to explain, the worse it got. How was he going to explain himself now? If he didn't admit it, he would be a heartless scumbag. If he admitted it, he would be a scumbag who fooled around outside. On one side was a teary-eyed brown-haired girl who almost threw herself into his arms and cried. On the other side was Irina, who had already taken out her magic caster's staff and was ready to punish him. Meg felt very hopeless. It was so difficult to be a man. No, I can't just sit here and wait for my death. Meg calmed himself down. He looked at the girl and coughed softly. Miss, you must have mistaken me for someone else. I'm here to look for the brewer, Old Sim. See, you still remember me. I knew you were here for me. The girl burst into tears and was about to throw herself at Meg again. Wait. Meg took a big step back and stared at the maiden in shock. WTF is system? Why didn't you fucking tell me that Old Sim is a woman? And such a young woman at that. Meg couldn't help but roar in his mind. Whether Old Sim is a woman or not is not important information. The ancients say, out of 3, one must be my teacher. Shut up. Go to hell. I'm going to cut off your internet fees. Host, incompetent rage can't solve the problem. We have to look at this dialectically. Old Sim is just a code name. An old man who reeks of alcohol can be called Old Sim, and a beautiful girl who smells good can also be called Old Sim. When you have the chance to have a deep conversation with one of them, which one would you choose? Moreover, you haven't paid your internet fees this month. Hurry up and pay when you get back, the system said calmly. Mag's brows were tightly knitted together. The Grey Temple's intelligence didn't mention this at all, so he naturally assumed that Old Sim was an old brewer. Of course, the biggest problem was this girl in front of him. Even if she was really Old Sim, she shouldn't treat someone who came to meet her like this. What was this? Making friends out of nothing. Meg glanced at Irina, who had already raised her magic caster's staff and was ready to hammer this adulterous couple to death. He felt that if he didn't come clean now, he would probably be beaten to death for no reason today. Comrade Old Sim, I'm the person sent by the organization to meet you. After your previous performance, I've already confirmed your identity. Meg looked at the girl with a serious expression, and then extended his right hand to her. I'm Meg, and I need your help now. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1533. Irina stared at Meg, and then at the lady with a frown. The lady looked at Meg's outstretched right hand, and gradually became excited. She grabbed Meg's hand and nodded with satisfaction. Yes. That's the feeling. The corner of Meg's mouth twitched a few times, and he hurriedly asked, what feeling? The feeling of finding the organization, the lady said with certainty. Yes, welcome back. Meg heaved a sigh of relief. That's right. That's the normal way to talk. Also, the feeling of being a man. A sly smile appeared on the lady's face. Meg hurriedly retracted his hand, and took out a Grey Temple token. He coughed softly, and said, Comrade Old Sim, this is my identity token. I wonder if you've received any notice from the organization. Yes, I've already received a notice from the organization to fully cooperate with you. Old Sim took the token and looked at it seriously. Then, he looked up at Meg blankly, and asked, is there a specific posture requirement? Not this kind of cooperation. Meg pulled back his token speechlessly, and helplessly said, there are too many people outside. Let's go in first. Yes, yes, yes. Please come in. Old Sim nodded, and hurriedly stepped aside to let Meg enter first. Meg looked up and nodded at Irina. He used his eyes to indicate that everything was under control, and that he would explain to her later. Then, he walked into the courtyard. As soon as he entered, the aroma of wine assailed his nostrils. The houses on both sides of the courtyard were probably wine cellars. There were some skirts and clothes hanging in the courtyard. There was a cute swing in the corner, and feminine decorations and ornaments could be seen everywhere. Meg suddenly understood why Irina had said those words earlier. Really, it was already considered light that she didn't beat him to death on the spot. Did the organization assign me a special mission? I've been waiting for this day for 10 years. I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the organization, including my life. Old Sim closed the door and rushed to Meg excitedly. Miss Old Sim, are you the best brewer in the Fog tribe? Meg wasn't in a hurry to talk about the mission. Instead, he looked at Old Sim suspiciously. This girl looked like she was only 23 or 24 years old. She didn't look like an experienced brewer at all, much less the best rum brewer in the world that the system had mentioned. After my grandfather passed away, I became the best rum brewer in the world. The girl nodded confidently, then shook her head with a smile. Old Sim is my grandfather. Actually, my name is Hannah. You're not Old Sim. Meg was shocked again. Didn't that mean he was fucking exposed? No, I'm Old Sim. The girl shook her head again. Then, your grandfather. Meg was a little confused. Old Sim is my grandfather's name. It's also a code name. After my grandfather passed away, I took over his position in the organization, and kept Old Sim's code name, Hannah said with a smile. So, I'm Hannah, and also Old Sim. Meg's eyebrows twitched. He couldn't tell what was wrong, but he felt that it shouldn't be like this. Grey Temple. On the wall, Irina looked at Meg and Hannah with a contemplative expression. Although she was still a little hostile toward this woman who threw herself at Meg, judging from their conversation, it shouldn't be the kind of relationship she had imagined. As for the organization, she couldn't think of any other organization that Meg was close to apart from the Grey Temple. Meg restrained his expression and calmly said to Hannah, "All right. Since that's the case, the first mission given to you by the organization is to teach me how to brew rum." "Huh?" Hannah was stunned and hesitantly said, "Just to teach you how to brew rum?" "Yes, this is a very important mission." Meg nodded with certainty. "I've waited for so many years. Isn't there a more exciting mission?" Hannah tried to say, for example, poisoning the new chief at the conferring banquet, or burying the eldest son of the August tribe's chief who will be attending the conferring banquet tomorrow. Oh, this lass is smart. Irina, who was originally not interested and was about to leave early, suddenly looked at Hannah with interest. That's how she should do things. Meg was slightly stunned when he heard that. He looked at Hannah with a strange expression and said, "From your identity, you're an informant who provides information." "No, I'm a spy." Hannah raised her head and puffed out her chest. "All right, I'll keep the first one you mentioned. I won't consider the second one for now." Meg nodded and continued, "Apart from that, another important objective of our trip is to rescue the former chief's son who's being held captive. Ferdinand. I know him. That prince who's even more shy than his sister." Hannah's eyes lit up. "Are we going to take action now?" No. We still need to formulate a plan and accurate information for the specific operation. I came to look for you tonight to verify some information and locations." Meg quickly pulled Hannah, who was about to go get her weapon. He was speechless. This lass was really an impatient informant. It was a good thing that he hadn't used her for so many years. "I know where he's being held." Hannah looked at Meg strangely. Meg withdrew his hand from Hannah's sleeve awkwardly. He still looked at Hannah strangely. "You really know where he's being held?" "Yes. The people in the Falk tribe's inner city all like to buy alcohol from me. This is also the only way I can obtain information." Hannah nodded and continued, "There was a guard leader drinking at my place yesterday. I put some talkative water in his drink, and he told me where Ferdinand is being held captive. If I remember correctly, it's the dungeon under the northern city wall of the inner city. He's being held in solitary confinement." The dungeon under the northern city wall. Meg frowned and pondered seriously for a while. There was no mention of this dungeon in the information that the Grey Temple gave him. "I've never heard of this dungeon before either. But that fellow was really a chatterbox yesterday, so he told me the exact location," Hannah said with a smile. "You're really an outstanding informant." Meg didn't know what to say anymore. "Then, are we going to take action now? I've even prepared my night suit, and I'm just waiting for the day the organization's orders arrive." Hannah had already started to unbutton her collar. "Wait." Meg quickly stopped her. He helplessly said, "Although that fellow might be telling the truth when he's drunk, we still don't know the exact situation in that dungeon, including the internal map, the guard situation, the rotation situation, and the exact situation of the prisoners being held. If we act rashly, not only will the operation fail, we might even threaten our own safety. Sigh. Boring. Hannah was discouraged immediately. She frowned and pouted as she looked at Meg. Then, what exactly can I do? Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1534. Tell me everything you know, Meg said to Hannah sternly. That's a long story. From what I know, my grandfather was hung up and beaten by my great-grandfather for a day and a night for wetting the bed when he was in his teens. Stop, stop, stop. I'm talking about the information related to Ferdinand and the dungeon where he's locked up. Meg held his forehead with his hand, feeling a headache coming on. Oh. Hannah pondered seriously for a while, and said, Ferdinand is 23 years old this year. He's quite cute, and looks a little like his younger sister. He's not as tall and strong as other orcs. He looks like he's been through a lot, and he even has a pair of pink ears. Hannah flipped her hair, revealing a pair of white orc ears hidden under her thick hair. Perplexed, she said, didn't they say that only the women of the royal family have pink ears? Look, even mine are white, but he actually has pink ears. Meg nodded. This was basically in line with the information he had. He continued, where's the dungeon? The dungeon is located right below the northern city wall of the inner city. The entrance is at the 38th brick of the northern city wall. There's no one guarding the outside, but there are 4 powerful guards keeping watch inside. It said that the new chief ordered his trusted subordinates to secretly build a new dungeon the night they invaded the inner city. The people locked up inside are all the important relatives and subordinates of the former chief of the Falk tribe. Apart from Ferdinand, his uncle and aunt, who are known for their love for each other, are also locked up there, Hannah said. Thank you very much for the information. Meg nodded. It was rare for an informant to be able to obtain such detailed information. He had to admit that Hannah was indeed gifted in this aspect. Then, when can we take action? Hannah asked, still unwilling to give up. We'll send someone to investigate the exact situation. The exact rescue plan and time hasn't been, boom. Before Mag could finish his sentence, a loud boom suddenly erupted from the direction of the inner city. A ball of fiery red flames rose into the air, accompanied by the faint sounds of fierce fighting. Did those fools really start to act according to the plan? Hannah looked in the direction of the inner city. She didn't seem too surprised. What plans and actions? Meg, on the other hand, was a little confused. Judging from the magical wave just now, it should have been cast by at least a level 9 fire mage, which meant that Camilla was excluded. They're the former chief's followers. Although Gary had gotten rid of a batch of orcs who were loyal to the former chief, there were still some who remained hidden. Meanwhile, Gary has already released the news that he'll be executing Ferdinand at the conferring ceremony tomorrow, completely cutting off the hopes and future of the former chief's faction. Therefore, these people decided to break Ferdinand out of prison one night earlier to save him. Hannah shrugged and said, I heard it from an old man 2 days ago. I didn't expect them to be serious. You should have reported such important information in advance. Mag said with a frown. Judging from the magic waves and the sounds of fighting and killing coming from the inner city, there were probably many orcs participating in this rescue mission. It was very likely that they were the last batch of loyal followers of the former chief. I thought they were just joking. I didn't expect them to create such a huge commotion, Hannah said innocently. Meg looked in the direction of the inner city and pondered for a while with a frown. He turned to look at Hannah and said, Are you providing the wine for the banquet tomorrow? Yes. The wine specially provided for the banquet is all prepared in the warehouse. Someone will come to collect it tomorrow morning. Hannah nodded. Is there a way to make the people who drink your wine more easily drunk or have their abilities reduced? Hannah pondered for a while, and said, if they want to get drunk faster, I can add a little knockout agent in it to increase the taste of the wine. At the same time, a normal person will get drunk after 1 glass. Even a level 10 great magic caster can't last more than 5 glasses. As for potions that reduce abilities, among the few potions that I've come up with, only the potion that reduces magic activity can reduce a magic caster's abilities significantly. However, it doesn't have much effect on strength-type orcs. Are you a brewer from the potion element? Meg looked at Hannah suspiciously. Talkative potion, knockout agent, potion that reduces magic activity. Are these really things that a brewer should know? These are just things that I've come up with when I'm bored. After all, brewing wine is too boring after a long time. Hannah shrugged. Then add some knockout agent in all the wine for the banquet in the warehouse, and add some potion that reduces magic activity in the batch of wine used for the main banquet. Meg looked at Hannah and instructed. He then looked in the direction of the inner city and said, postpone the mission of learning how to brew wine. I'm going to the inner city to take a look at the situation now. It only takes 10 minutes to add the potions. Can you bring me to the inner city to take a look? I know the inner city very well, Hannah said expectantly. No, the inner city is too dangerous now. Meg shook his head and looked at Hannah with a serious expression. He said, Comrade Old Sim, as a qualified informant, what is the first rule? Resolutely obey the orders of the organization. Hannah replied with a serious expression. Very good, carry out the orders. Meg turned and walked out of the door. Yes. Hannah replied as she looked at Meg's back view. Her eyes were glowing with excitement. Yes, yes, yes. This is the feeling. I like the feeling of being integrated into the organization and being controlled by their orders. I'm so excited. I've already grasped the basic situation. I just don't know if Ferdinand has been transferred in the past 2 days. Gary purposely released the news in advance, most likely because he wants to wipe out all the remaining rebels on the eve of the conferring ceremony. Meg left Hannah's small courtyard, and looked at Irina who landed lightly beside him. He said, this batch of orcs might be the last batch who are loyal to the former chief. If they're all dead, I'm afraid it will be very difficult for Connie and Ferdinand to re-establish a stable and powerful regime. All these are not important. Irina looked into Meg's eyes, and scrutinized him. Tell me, when did you join the Grey Temple? And you seem to be doing well. Have you already confessed your identity to Roland? I'm good. The Grey Temple is considered a cooperative relationship. It's just an idle position, and can't be considered as an official member. Before I came to the Falk tribe, they gave me a temporary increase in authority. Meg shook his head. As for my identity, I think Roland and Michael already have their suspicions, but they're pretending to be ignorant. We don't have to expose this layer of paper ourselves. Instead, it's more convenient for everyone. These 2 sly old foxes are indeed not so easy to fool. Irina pursed her lips. Her gaze landed in the direction of the inner city, and an expectant smile gradually appeared on her face. If we want to keep these fellows, we naturally have to do something bigger. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1535. Fuck, Connie, am back again. In the darkness, a figure fell from the steep cliff quietly. The petite figure tapped lightly on the rock wall, and landed on the protruding rocks just right every time. Meow. Just then, a black cat scurried out of a small hole in the rock wall. Mummy duck. That nimble figure was shocked. She lost her footing and fell from the rock wall that was more than 3 meters tall. You fellows, to think that I used to give you meat to eat. Connie got up from the ground and patted the dirt off her body. She looked up at the few heads that popped out from the cliff in frustration. Just then, explosions and fighting sounds came from the direction of the inner city. Why are they fighting? I wonder where Boss and the rest are now. Connie looked in that direction doubtfully. After thinking for a while, she still headed in the direction of the inner city. The black silhouette passed through the houses without revealing itself, nor did it make any sound or movement. It quickly approached the inner city. Seems like it will be quite lively tonight. Lex appeared at the top of the cliff. She looked down at the small city that had erupted with many battles. Her expression didn't change much. She turned to the northwest and squinted her eyes. She mumbled to herself softly, I wonder if Oster will appear this time. After standing at the top of the mountain for a while, Lex's gaze landed on the inner city again. She sighed softly with a complicated expression. Then, she took a step forward and fell straight down the cliff. It was really depressing to have a disciple who had no sense of direction. In the west of the city, dozens of orcs in black were heavily surrounded. Behind them, there were broken rocks everywhere. A huge hole had been blasted in the ground, revealing a dark tunnel that led downwards. Master Devold, we didn't find young Master Ferdinand in the secret prison. We might have fallen into a trap. An orc struggled to push aside a giant rhinoceros as he looked at the tall and skinny orc standing on a pile of rubble and casting fire magic with grief and indignation. After the complicated incantation was finished, a giant inferno beast charged into the crowd and wreaked havoc, giving the black-clothed orcs a chance to catch their breaths. What about the other places? The tall and thin orc known as Devold had a worried look on his face. I still haven't seen the signal of success. I'm afraid the situation is worse than ours, the orc replied. Devold pondered for a moment and made a prompt decision. Let our brothers break out of the encirclement and leave this place first. Devold, don't you think it's too late to leave now? A somewhat playful voice sounded from the darkness. A stout orc wearing a tiger skin coat sat on a huge black beast and slowly walked out of the darkness. The bone-chilling cold seemed to have swept over from the endless darkness. The fire beasts that were wreaking havoc among the orcs seemed to have been shackled in an instant. They struggled a few times before they were completely annihilated. Devold, you've actually hidden very well and fooled the chief and me perfectly. I didn't expect you to lose your patience in the end. Jerome sat on the huge beast and looked down at Devold. He mocked, there aren't many people as loyal as you. I wonder if the old chief would be pleased with your actions if he knew about it. Jerome, you traitor. How can you live up to His Majesty's trust in you? Devold shouted at Jerome sternly. His magic caster's staff glowed again. I've always been loyal to Chief Gary. I can only blame the old chief for being too muddle-headed to hand over such an important task like guarding the city gates to me. There was a hint of smugness in Jeremy's smile, but his gaze gradually turned ruthless as he looked at Durward. However, Durward, you old fellow, Chief Gary has treated you well, and he even conferred you a territory a few days ago. Yet, you did such a thing. How dare you call me a traitor and a lackey? Durward's eyes were filled with hatred. The old chief worked hard for the Falk tribe all his life. He allowed the Falk tribe to survive the racial war, and even made us the second largest orc tribe in the past 100 years. Gary treated me well, but what he did was something that I could not accept morally. Only young Master Ferdinand can inherit the chief's position. Gary is the Kingslayer, and the only outcome for him is death. Moreover, he will be nailed to the pillar of shame forever. Durward said with a straight face, and each of his words was firm. Ha! History has always been written by the victors. Only losers like you will be nailed to the pillar of shame. Jerome sneered, and raised his black magic caster's staff at Devold. Since you want to see that little bastard Ferdinand so much, I'll capture you and execute you with him at the conferring banquet tomorrow. Although you're known as the strongest powerhouse below the 10th tier in our tribe, you're underestimating me, Devold, too much if you think you can take me down so easily. Devold pointed his magic caster's staff at Jerome, and a red flaming dragon darted out of the magic caster's staff towards Jerome. Ice barrier. Jerome pointed his magic caster's staff at the giant dragon, and layers of mirror-like ice barriers appeared in front of the giant dragon. Bam, bam, bam. Following a series of shattering sounds, the giant dragon smashed the ice barriers into smithereens. However, the red flames on the giant dragon's body also gradually dissipated after the collision. When the last ice barrier was smashed, that giant red dragon was already so dim that it was about to dissipate. The giant black cheetah under Jerome swung its tail sideways, and smashed that giant red dragon into sparks. Devold, you're already old. You're no longer the Falk tribe's fire god. Jerome smirked disdainfully. He planted the ice barriers on the ground, and those orcs in black who were still trying to resist were all frozen instantly. The orcs swarmed forward, and captured all of them. Lord Flurkin will never forgive you for what you've done. Devold's 3 consecutive fireballs forced the orcs behind him to retreat, and he dashed out of the opening that he had forcefully created. Lord Flurkin doesn't care who provides him with offerings, Jerome said nonchalantly as he urged the giant beast under him to chase after Devold. Boom! Right at this moment, a loud sound that reverberated throughout the entire Falk tribe suddenly came from the north of the city. The ground of the entire inner city seemed to tremble along with it. This is... Jerome turned to the north of the city in shock. Could it be that an even stronger existence was involved in this chaos tonight? What a terrifying commotion. All the orcs were also shocked, and were at a loss for what to do. Chapter 1536. Meg looked at the city wall that had been destroyed by dozens of meters, as well as Irina, who was slowly retracting her right leg. His throat rolled subconsciously. This was a city wall that was dozens of meters tall and more than 5 meters thick. Other than the dead, not many people in this world knew that Irina's close combat abilities were so terrifying. When I saw that woman jump into your arms tonight, I wanted to give you guys a light kick like this, Irina said with a smile as she turned to look at Meg. I'm on a mission, so I can't help myself. Meg sighed softly. He could feel his calves shaking uncontrollably. Who could withstand such a light kick? But, we're just entering the city. There's no need to tear down the city wall, right? Meg quickly changed the topic. Didn't you say that you wanted to help little Connie keep some useful people? They're most likely surrounded and in a chaotic battle now. If we don't create a big commotion, they won't be able to escape even if they want to, Irina said matter-of-factly. That's true. Meg pondered for a while. Irina had already grasped the essence of the art of war that he had imparted to her. Since the wall has been destroyed, why don't we go directly to see if Ferdinand is really locked up in that secret underground prison? Meg looked at Irina and said, Are you confident that we can leave before their men arrive? I set up a fixed-point teleportation portal on the cliff just now. As long as I want to leave, no one can stop me, Irina said confidently. Alright, let's go take a look then. Meg nodded, and took out a black handkerchief to cover his face, leaving only his eyes exposed. Do you need to disguise yourself a little? Meg looked at Irina, who had changed back into her disguise. If we kill them all, then no one will see us, right? Irina looked at Meg, who had wrapped himself up tightly, in confusion. Meg was speechless. North of the city. At the top of the majestic palace tower, Gary looked to the north of the city with a frown. There weren't many people in the Falk tribe who could cause such a commotion. One of them was right beside him, and the other two were also in the inner city. She had received their support and help when she rebelled and killed the king back then. It was also impossible for them to do something like this on the eve of the coronation. "Chief, do you need me to take a look?" An orc in golden armor standing 3 steps behind him asked. "Go, Basil. See who dares to come to our folk tribe to make trouble." "Twist his head back for me," Gary said with a cold smile. "Yes." The golden-armored beast man called Basil turned and left. "Get Daryl and Kurt here. I have something to discuss with them," Gary instructed. "Yes," one of his subordinates replied and left quickly. "Big brother, you've been in this position for long enough. I'm just taking back what belongs to me. You can die in peace. I will make the folk tribe the #1 tribe, and even rule the entire world." Gary looked up at the sky and grinned, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. He turned and walked down the tower, leaving behind a cold order. "Kill all the rebels tonight on the spot." Meg and the rest quickly found the location of the secret dungeon according to Hannah's information. However, the city walls here didn't look any different from other places. "Seems like we need to find where the door is. Maybe there's a switch or something like, boom." Before Meg could finish his sentence, the city walls in front of him disappeared again, leaving behind a hole on the ground and a dumbfounded orc guard inside. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a beauty before?" Irina casually smacked him with a stool, and sent him flying into the wall, turning him into a drop of mosquito blood. "Seems like I've watched too many dramas." Meg raised his eyebrows, and jumped into the hole. He didn't take another look at that 8th-tier orc that was smacked away by Irina. Since Gary had assigned him to guard here, he had to be one of his trusted subordinates. They would probably have to kill a lot of people like him. A regime change was mostly built on bloodshed. It was like that when Gary killed the old chief and seized the throne. Now, they wanted to kill Gary and return the folk tribe to Connie and her elder brother's control. It was the same. The tunnel was very narrow, and could only allow 2 people to pass through at a time. The height was less than 2 meters, and it extended all the way down. There was a wall lamp every few meters, and the ground was dug out from the rocks. The commotion on the ground should have alerted the guards in the dungeon. A few heavy stone doors fell, and blocked the tunnel tightly. However, these stone doors that weighed more than 5,000 kilograms were like paper under Irina's feet, and she kicked them into the depths of the dungeon one by one. As for those orc guards who tried to resist, they were all smacked away by Irina, and tragically turned into decorations on the wall. Meg followed behind Irina unhurriedly. He had no qualms about being a little lamb that was being protected by a big shot. He came in just like that without drawing any blood. The dungeon guards were basically cleared out. Meg rescued one from under Irina's feet midway. He pressed a kitchen knife against his neck, and sternly asked, "Where is Ferdinand locked up?" That prison guard was already scared out of his wits. He said with a trembling voice, "Ferdinand is not here. Don't kill me. He's really not here." "Not here? Then where is he?" "I heard that he's here." Meg pressed the knife closer, and the sharp blade cut into his flesh. He was indeed locked up here during this period of time. But he was taken away last night. I don't know where he was taken to. It was the chief who gave the order personally. That orc was so anxious that he wanted to cry, but his drooping hand slowly moved towards his waist. Worthless conversation. Irina kicked him away lightly, and he turned into a puddle of mosquito blood at the end of the tunnel tens of meters away. Meg wasn't sure if that orc was speaking the truth. He could only ask Irina to wait for a while he walked along the tunnel of the dungeon with a torch in his hand. There were over a dozen cells on both sides of the tunnel. Through the cell doors, he could see the prisoners curled up in the corners. Most of them were dressed in rags, and had injuries on their bodies. They seemed to have been frightened when they heard the commotion earlier, but still looked out instinctively when they saw the light of the fire. "Is Ferdinand here?" "We're here to save you." Meg frowned as he looked at those orcs whose original appearances could no longer be seen clearly. He could only ask loudly. "Save me. Save me. I'm loyal to the old chief, to young Master Ferdinand. Save me. Please save me." Hearing Meg's words, the people in the cells rushed to the door of the old cell one by one. They stuck their hands out from the gaps between the metal bars, and shouted at Meg in a heart-wrenching voice. "We're young Master Ferdinand's uncle and aunt. Please save us. We might know where he was transferred to." Just then, an anxious voice sounded from the cell in the corner. "Wonderful Book House." Chapter 1537. Upon hearing that, Meg walked straight to the cell in the corner. He had heard from Hannah that Ferdinand's uncle and aunt, whose love was stronger than gold, were also locked up in this dungeon. Now, it seemed like the information was indeed very accurate. "Do you know where Ferdinand has been brought to?" Meg moved the torch forward, and saw the situation in the cell clearly. This was a cell that was only 5 to 6 square meters in size. Just by approaching it, they could smell a foul stench. A middle-aged orc couple was clinging to the metal bars. Their hair and clothes were in a mess, and the wounds on their bodies showed how inhumane they had been. "I'm Romeo, and this is my wife, Juliet. The chief's wife is my elder sister. We're not sure where Ferdinand has been brought to, and we're very anxious now." The middle-aged orc shook his head, and said with a pained expression, "Ever since Gary rebelled and killed the king, we became his prisoners. Since then, we've been locked up in several prisons and dungeons. We were only locked up in this newly built dungeon about 10 days ago. This was the first time we saw Ferdinand. He's become skinnier. He must have suffered a lot during this period. Someone entered his cell this morning, and took him away not long after. We don't know where they went." "This name." Meg raised his eyebrows. He felt that something was amiss. "We heard from those fellows that they were going to kill us at Gary's conferring banquet, and the banquet is in the next 2 days. Gary might have captured Ferdinand and brought him to the palace. There are the most powerful and tightest guards there, and it's also the safest place." Juliet appeared much calmer as she analyzed the situation. Meg frowned. Romeo and Juliet's words meant that Ferdinand was no longer in this dungeon. They were still a step too late, and ended up missing. "Someone's here." Irina's lowered voice sounded. "Can you take us with you?" Romeo looked at Meg, and then at the tunnel. He gritted his teeth, and said, "If you can't, please bring my wife along and help her leave this dirty and dark place. Please. Can you walk?" Meg looked back at Irina. "Killing him won't be a problem. It's just that we might be exposed. The other 3 level 10 experts will be here soon." Irina glanced at Romeo and Juliet and frowned slightly. "We can only take one with us. The teleportation circle is very small." "This." Meg looked at the 2 people in the cell. Their original plan tonight was to rescue Ferdinand, and there was no space for a second person. "Please take her away. She is an elegant woman. She should not stay in this dark and damp dungeon. A delicate flower should bloom in a sunny place." Romeo said affectionately. "You are my sunshine. If I leave alone, even if I'm not in this dungeon, this world will become even more cruel to me. We have an agreement, so how can I abandon you and leave by myself?" Juliet shook her head, and turned to look at Meg. A smile appeared on her face that was covered in dirt and dust, and she said, "Don't worry about us. He definitely won't leave me alone. You guys go." don't get caught. Meg saw happiness and calmness in this smile. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "Okay. Let's go," Meg said softly as he turned and walked toward Irina. "If the two of us work together, it shouldn't be difficult to kill that guy outside." Irina looked in Romeo and Juliet's direction. "If that guy outside dies, he will probably die before we find Ferdinand." Meg shook his head. "I'm really not suited to playing hide-and-seek." Irina rolled her eyes. All she could think of was flipping the table. Footsteps could be heard from the direction of the tunnel. The orcs locked up in the cells were screaming for Meg and Juliet to save them. When Meg stepped into the circle of light that lit up on the ground, he saw a little girl who had been squeezed to the edge of a cell. She reached out a little hand to him. Her eyes seemed a little numb in the darkness, and the little hand that reached out from the iron bars was just standing there blankly, as if she had lost all hope in everything. Irina's gaze also landed on that little girl. A pale gold teleportation portal lit up under their feet. With a flash of light, the two of them disappeared on the spot. Almost at the same time, the golden-armored orc Basil dashed down from the tunnel. He gripped the iron rod tightly in his hand, and sized up his surroundings vigilantly. His gaze landed on the stone doors that had been destroyed by something, and he squinted his eyes. With his immense strength, it was not difficult for him to smash these stone doors. However, there were inscriptions that Daryl had personally placed on these stone doors. Even if he wanted to destroy them quickly, he would have to enter his beast form first. Furthermore, these stone doors that had been destroyed did not have any traces of magic on them. There were also no traces of strong magic elements around them. In other words, the other party had used his terrifying strength to smash these stone doors one by one, and entered the dungeon in the simplest and most direct way. The dungeon guards should have all been killed. The way they died was also very direct. They should have been smacked to death by some kind of blunt object. After coming to this conclusion, Basil's expression turned serious, and he became even more cautious as he moved forward. The other party was very likely to be a 10th-tier powerhouse who specialized in strength, just like him. There was no other person in the Fog tribe, so the only possibility was that there were other species that wanted to interfere with the Fog tribe's affairs. Judging from the time, the other party should still be in this dungeon now. He had blocked the exit, so there might be a fierce battle coming up. Fortunately, this was the Fog tribe, after all. He only needed to ask Gary for help, and they would be able to rush over immediately. "Come out." "I see you," Basil said, trying to bluff. The passageway was completely silent. There was a bloody smell in the air, and the orcs in the cells were all curled up in a corner, shivering as if they were frightened. No one responded to Basil. "Why, you brought her out." On the cliff, a golden light lit up. Meg looked at the little girl who appeared beside them at the same time, and couldn't help but look at Irina in shock. That little girl looked to be about 10 years old, and was clearly a little dazed. She looked around at the white world outside, and the thin clothes she was wearing made her shiver. Her eyes gradually brightened as she breathed in the fresh and free air. "She's the one who shouldn't be there the most. Those fellows deserve to die," Irina said to that little girl with a pitiful expression. Chapter 1538. Let's find a place to settle her down first. Meg glanced at the timid little girl, and pondered for a while before looking at the stone alley. "Fellow townsmen, I'll leave this child to you. Please take good care of her." 5 minutes later, Meg knocked on Hannah's door again. Then, he passed the child to her while she was still in a daze, and closed the courtyard door for her. Seems like tonight's chaos was indeed a trap set by Gary. He intends to do a thorough cleanup before the conferring ceremony. Meg frowned, and said, "In that case, Ferdinand is most likely not locked up in the other prisons and dungeons." It's more likely that he's in the palace. Are we attacking the palace tonight? Irina's eyes lit up slightly. We're not familiar with the palace, so it's not suitable for us to sneak in. Moreover, the other party has at least 4 10th-tier powerhouses. It's not a good idea to attack by force either. Meg shook his head. Then, we can only sit back and do nothing. Irina frowned. Connie should have arrived by now. According to our agreement, she'll come and look for us. We can leave the assassination to her. She knows the palace better than any of us. Is that really the case? Probably, that's the case. Meg suddenly lost his confidence. Since that bald master of hers dared to let her out, we should give her the space and opportunity to unleash her potential. I don't believe that the hairless monk, who finally took in a disciple after growing out his hair, would really ignore her and watch her die. Meg smiled and said, if I'm not wrong, he should be following behind Connie not far away. No one would feel at ease letting such a disciple out. You've become sly. Irina looked at Meg. The world has changed. I like it. Main kitchen. Main kitchen. Where exactly is the main kitchen? Usually, my meals are sent directly to the palace. How would I know where the main kitchen is? Connie squatted at the top of a big tree and poked her fingers, feeling wronged. She didn't expect that she would be so confused as soon as she entered the city. After staying on the tree for a while and making sure that it was impossible for her to find the main kitchen with her eyes alone in the dark night, she slid down the tree trunk and secretly grabbed an orc from between 2 groups of people who were fighting not far away. I have something to ask you. If you tell me nicely, I'll let you go. If you lie to me, I'll kill you. The masked Connie pressed his sharp claws against the orc's neck like 3 knives. I'll tell you everything. Don't kill me. The orc felt a chill on his neck and said in a trembling voice. Tell me where the main kitchen is. Connie demanded coldly. That orc was obviously stunned. Everyone he met tonight was asking about young Master Ferdinand's whereabouts. Why would someone ask about the main kitchen? Could it be that this petite but ruthless black-clothed orc wanted to have a meal? If you don't tell me, I'll kill you. Connie retracted her claws a little, and the sharp cold glint cut his neck. I'll tell you. The main kitchen is in the west of the city. Follow this path and walk all the way to the west. The main kitchen is in the biggest courtyard, that orc quickly agreed, afraid that he would get a boxed meal for no reason because of a kitchen. The west? Connie looked around and pondered seriously for a while. She pulled that orc out from the wall and pressed her sharp claws against his back. Bring me there. That orc had an innocent look. Who did he offend? He was sent to suppress someone who broke into the prison in the middle of the night, and now he was kidnapped for no reason. However, the chill behind him was too chilling, so he had no choice but to bring Connie to the west. You've learned how to find people. That's a good start. Rex stood on the wall far away, and nodded with satisfaction as he watched Connie dragging that orc away quickly. About 10 minutes later, that orc stopped outside an alley. He pointed to a big courtyard not far away, and said, That's the main kitchen. Can you let me go? There's the aroma of food. Connie sniffed with her nose and nodded. She thought for a while, and removed her claws from that orc's back. She pretended to be arrogant and said, You can scram now. That orc immediately turned and ran after hearing that. He turned into the alley, and soon disappeared without a trace. Why are you running so fast? I'm not going to kill you. Connie looked suspiciously in the direction that the orc disappeared in, and then walked towards the main kitchen. The Falk tribe was in a mess now, and she didn't know where she should go or what to do. She had to find Boss to get her mission first. Phew, that orc ran through half of the inner city in one go, and took 7 to 8 turns before leaning against a wall and panting heavily. That woman just now should be Princess Connie, right? Pink and white ears, and a petite figure. She's the only one in the folk tribe. That orc looked excited. Her bounty is as high as 10 million copper coins. I'll go and report it now, and get someone to capture her. You don't have to. A tall black shadow appeared at the entrance of the alley, and walked over slowly. Who are you? That orc asked nervously as he hurriedly drew out the long sword hanging from his waist. I hate talking nonsense with dead people the most. That person appeared in front of the orc, and then gave him a punch. The long sword shattered under the iron fist, and that orc's horrified face was also shattered at the same time. This lass is still too soft-hearted. Rex kicked that orc into a pile of rocks, and then turned to leave. Connie climbed over the wall and entered the kitchen. She ran one round on the roof, and was about to dash in that direction when she decided on a direction. I say, where are you going? A low voice sounded. Whoa! Connie was shocked, and her sharp claws were already out. She turned around and heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Meg, who was sitting on the roof, and asked in surprise, Boss, why are you here? Aren't you cold in the wind? Of course not. Meg rubbed his hands and stood up. He stayed on the roof in the middle of the night because he was afraid that this fellow would be confused and lose his way. He was about to go down when he couldn't help but ask Connie curiously, where were you going to look for us just now? The kitchen. Don't you usually stay in the kitchen? I'm a professional assassin, so I still have this bit of judgment, Connie said matter-of-factly, and even revealed an I'm very smart smile on her face. There are indeed not many assassins like you. Meg nodded with a complicated expression. He suddenly didn't understand why Rex wanted to take this disciple. Wasn't it obvious that Rex wanted him to lose his integrity in his later years? It wouldn't be strange at all if she accidentally killed her employer. Chapter 1539. Meg brought Connie down from the roof. Under the cover of the night, they walked towards the small courtyard as they chatted. Do you have any special feelings after returning to the folk tribe again? It feels a little unfamiliar. Connie seemed to be a little down. It's all right. Everything will be fine. Meg quickly comforted her. The little princess of the tribe had become a fallen assassin in the blink of an eye, and her family had been killed or locked up. She definitely wouldn't feel good about returning to this place again. I feel that the houses and roads have changed a lot. I'm afraid I'll get lost again, Connie said with a grave expression. Meg choked on his words. After a while, he coughed dryly, and said, It's all right. Take your time. Oh, yes. Do you know where my brother is locked up now? I'm going to save him tonight. Connie asked Meg with concern. Meg said as they walked, We've already been to a secret dungeon tonight. Your brother was locked up there before this, but it's a pity that he had already been transferred away when we arrived. The other dungeons were also raided tonight. This should be a trap set up by Gary to get rid of the last batch of orcs who were loyal to the former chief. Therefore, your brother is most likely in the palace now. The palace? Connie stopped in her tracks, and her eyes lit up. That's the place I'm most familiar with, including all the secret passageways and dungeons in the palace. I hid there when I was young when I played hide-and-seek with my brother. I'm going to save him now. He's right there. What's the rush? Meg stopped Connie, who was about to turn and leave. He looked at her and said, Gary is in the palace now, and there might be 2 to 3 10th-tier powerhouses there too. Can you kill them all? I'm very professional. Connie opened her mouth, but she didn't seem to be confident. Come here. We need to come up with a detailed plan. Meg opened the side door of the courtyard, and pulled Connie into the big room in the middle. In the room, everyone had already changed into black night clothes, including Camilla, who had failed in her investigation. Everyone was present. Big Sister Connie, are you also lost on your way home? Amy looked at Connie and asked curiously. How could I be lost? This is my home. Connie quickly waved her hands. The situation is basically clear now. We couldn't find Ferdinand in all the prisons and secret cells in the Falk tribe, and there are over 500 people outside attacking the prisons in different areas in an attempt to rescue Ferdinand. This has caused the current chaotic situation. Meg took out a map of the Falk tribe. A few prisons that were still in battle were marked on it with red handwriting. He pointed at the palace in the center of the inner city, and said, "Our target is here now. We need to enter the palace while ensuring our own safety, and search for the place where Ferdinand might be locked up, and rescue him." Camilla lay lazily on the chair, and asked Meg, "I've just walked around outside the palace. There are at least 3 10th-tier powerhouses inside, and 2 of them are magic casters. It's not easy to sneak into the palace without being cordoned off by them. How do we go about rescuing Ferdinand from under their noses?" Everyone frowned when they heard that, and showed signs of nervousness and uneasiness. Among all of them, Irina was the most powerful. Apart from her, there was Camilla, who had 9th-tier power, followed by Elizabeth and Gina, who had 8th-tier power. Barbara was a 7th-tier spatial magic caster. Yabamiya's combat power was about 5th tier now, but she hadn't experienced a real battle yet. Anna and Jane were basically negligible in terms of combat. Amy could also fight with a 7th-tier opponent for some time with the help of the little fire lotuses that she kept. Even with Meg, who was hiding his power, they had no chance of winning. Executing Ferdinand in front of everyone was a very important thing for Gary. It meant the end of an era, and also meant that the Falk tribe had officially entered his era. He didn't even trust the dungeon that was just built today. That showed how important Ferdinand was to him. Perhaps 1 or 2 of those 3 10th-tier powerhouses are guarding Ferdinand right now, Elizabeth said coldly. Everyone's gaze gradually landed on Meg. The huge difference in power, and the uncertainty of Ferdinand's location, made this rescue operation very difficult. We tried it earlier by creating a commotion in the inner city to lure one of the 10th-tier powerhouses out of the palace. If we want to enter the palace to save Ferdinand, we have to lure the 10th-tier powerhouse out of the palace first to ensure the safety of the people who enter the palace. Meg looked at Irina. "You can leave this to me. It won't be difficult to tear down the entire inner city." Irina nodded with a relaxed expression and said, "However, I can't guarantee that all those fellows will come out of the palace." Meg then looked at Barbara and said, "Barbara, I need you to set up a one-time teleportation portal between the palace and the canyon 10 kilometers away. Once we find and save Ferdinand, or if the operation fails and we need to evacuate urgently, we will be able to escape unscathed." "All right." Barbara got up and said to Yabamiya, "Mia, bring me out of the city." Yabamiya quickly got up. "Be careful. After setting up the teleportation portal outside the city, come back to the courtyard and meet us. We will then enter the palace together," Meg instructed. The 2 of them acknowledged, and Barbara brought Mia out of the kitchen using a short-range teleportation spell. Meg looked at Camilla and said, "Camilla, I need you to locate the location of the 4 10th-tier powerhouses and monitor them in real time. Also, report to me in real time. This will determine the safety of the frontline personnel." Camilla hesitated for a moment. With a wave of her hand, a little black bat flew out of her wide sleeve, and landed on Meg's shoulder. "This is..." Meg looked at the little bat on his shoulder, a little puzzled. Compared to ordinary shifty-looking bats, this bat looked much rounder, and had delicate features. Wow, what a cute little bat. Amy knelt on the stool, and reached out to stroke the little bat gently. That's right. She looks quite unique. Meg couldn't help but reach out to pinch the bat's face. It was soft, and quite comfortable to pinch. Don't touch. Camilla, who was originally slumped lazily on the chair, suddenly sat up straight. She subconsciously clamped her legs together, and her face turned red in an instant. No pop-up window. Chapter 1540. Everyone looked at Camilla, who was reacting strangely, in astonishment. This is my personal bat. I can communicate with you remotely through it. It represents me, so you must respect it. Camilla said unnaturally. Oh. Everyone was deep in thought. Biotechnology. Meg was also surprised. Then, he said in his heart, System, return a walkie-talkie. Host, the walkie-talkie is a custom-made product. Once sold, it cannot be returned. The system said seriously. I am a Distinguished Plus member. I can enjoy a 7-day unconditional refund. If you don't return it, I won't buy it for the whole year. Meg smiled coldly. The system was silent for a long time. A return list slowly appeared in Meg's mind. A custom-made walkie-talkie costs $14.99 copper coins. Is this personal bat stable? Meg looked at the slightly dull bat on his shoulder. He extended a finger and poked its armpit as he asked suspiciously. Camilla stood up from the chair with a whoosh. Her right hand unconsciously clenched as she walked towards the window. Her expression was unnatural as she said, I'm leaving. Also, I'm warning you again. Don't touch it. Otherwise, I'll take it back. Camilla stopped beside Meg and warned him seriously. Meg shrugged. He only felt that this bat looked a little silly and cute. He reminded her, be careful to hide your identity. Be careful. The night is my veil. We vampires are the kings of the night. Camilla snorted softly with unknown emotions. She opened the window halfway and turned into a black bat, quickly disappearing into the darkness. Why are you so fierce? Meg raised his eyebrows. He extended a finger and poked the little bat's armpit twice. Kikik, no one noticed that a bat in the sky suddenly laughed strangely. It lost control of its originally stable flying posture and crashed directly into a bush. Meg, you bastard. After a while, the bat flew out of the bushes again and let out a sorrowful roar. Seeing that the wooden bat had no reaction, Meg couldn't be bothered to continue teasing it. He looked at everyone and said, once those level 10 powerhouses are transferred out of the palace, we will have to enter the palace to carry out our operation. Connie is good at sneaking in, and is relatively familiar with the palace. You will be in charge of finding the place where Ferdinand might be locked up. Amy, Elizabeth, and Gina will be in charge of providing support and assisting in the search. Yes. Connie nodded and glanced at the bat on Meg's shoulder. How do I contact you if I find it? This is a mini walkie-talkie. Put it in your ears, and we will be able to communicate without any obstacles within a range of 10 kilometers. Meg took out a box, and took out some mini earphones from it, and distributed them to everyone. Like this. Put it in your ears and press the button to activate it gently. You will be able to connect to our common communication channel. Meg demonstrated to everyone how to put on the mini walkie-talkie and activated it at the same time. Everyone imitated Meg and put on the walkie-talkie. The contact surface was soft and comfortable, and they didn't feel any discomfort after putting it on. It didn't affect their hearing at all. 0101, this is 01. All combat units, please answer if you hear me, Meg said in a low voice. Oh. Everyone's faces were filled with surprise. Father, how did your voice reach my ears? Amy looked at Meg in shock. Gina and Elizabeth shivered at the same time, and a slight blush appeared on their faces. This won't make my ears pregnant, right? Gina thought to herself worriedly. She had never listened to a man speak at such a close distance. It was as if he was speaking directly into her ears. Her heart seemed to tremble the moment she heard his voice. Elizabeth's expression was also slightly uncomfortable. This inexplicable intimate whisper-like feeling made her feel uncomfortable, even though he was only confirming the machine with everyone. 0101, this is 02. Please answer if you hear me. Connie had already begun to try to speak. Sure enough, her voice clearly reached everyone's ears. Haha, this is so fun. Amy's eyes lit up, and her voice reached everyone's ears as well. Everyone quickly put aside their embarrassment and started chatting with each other. They were having a lot of fun. The microphone's reception was excellent, and it also weakened any noise other than the person's voice, so the conversation didn't sound so messy. Alright, let's give each other a code name. We're strictly prohibited from chatting during the operation, and we have to maintain discipline. Meg began to establish order and divide the work. A 10th grade orc. In the resplendent hall, Chief Gary listened to his subordinate's latest report with a frown. He was surprised and puzzled. Chief, since Basil has already locked him up in the dungeon, do you want me and Kurt to go and capture him together? Daryl, who was wearing a black leather armor, said as he stood up. That scar-faced orc at the side also stood up suddenly, and angrily said, how dare he create trouble on the eve of the chief's conferring ceremony. He's simply looking down on the Falk tribe. Capture him, and execute him together with that chap Ferdinand tomorrow. We'll also let them know that the Falk tribe is not to be trifled with. Gary frowned as he pondered. Right at this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from the south. This is. The three people in the hall were slightly shocked. This commotion wasn't any smaller than the sound that came from the north of the city earlier. Soon, a guard came in, and half knelt on the ground as he nervously reported, Chief, all the guards and reinforcements outside the prison in the south of the city have been wiped out by a mysterious person. None of them survived. What? Gary's voice dragged out immediately. Could there be more than one 10th tier powerhouse? Daryl and Kurt were also shocked. The prison in the south of the city was the biggest prison in the Falk tribe. There were many prisoners there, and most of them were the former chief's followers and family members. Many of them would be executed during the conferring ceremony tomorrow. This was also the biggest trap that they had set up. They released the news that Ferdinand was being held captive here, and then arranged for a powerful troop to provide support, intending to capture most of the troublemakers in one fell swoop. There were even 2 level 9 mages leading the troop. And such an elite team was actually annihilated right under their noses. Gary said with a dark expression, Daryl, Kurt, bring your men to the prison in the south of the city. Kill all the invaders and those who escaped. Yes. The 2 of them answered at the same time, and strode out. Where did these fellows come from? Is Oster going back on his word? Gary paced back and forth in the hall twice, and reached out to press on a slightly protruding piece of wood beside the chair. The wall behind the chair slowly flipped inwards, and revealed a passageway that wasn't very wide. Gary strode into the house. Chapter 1541. Outside the prison in the south of the city, the black-clothed orcs who had fallen into a heavy siege in despair looked at the orc army that had been slaughtered in front of them. They were dumbfounded as they looked at the man who had kicked off the top of the prison. There was surprise and fear in their eyes. This was an existence that could not even be described as a devil. He descended from the sky and crashed into the orcs like a wolf in a flock of sheep. Even a 9th-tier magic caster's magic could not keep up with his rhythm, and was smashed into minced meat with a single punch. One man could take on 1,000 soldiers. That was probably how it was. The scariest thing was that the battle had already ended. None of the orcs in black could see what he looked like as they watched his back gradually disappear into the distance. He only left behind a sentence. Connie asked me to come and save you. It's Princess Connie. Princess Connie is not dead. She found powerful reinforcements and is back. All the orcs were stunned for a moment before they exclaimed in shock. During this period of time, there had been news that Princess Connie had been killed, and the chief's only son was young Master Ferdinand. They did not expect Princess Connie to not be killed, and she even found such powerful reinforcements to return to the Falk tribe. The prison had been broken, and the orcs who were locked up also broke out of their cells. With the help of the orcs in black, they started to escape the prison in the south of the city. Little fellow, I can only lure more old things out for you to give you some space to perform. Rex rushed to the next noisy battlefield. Although these orcs were a little stupid, they were the foundation of the new regime in the future, after all. He had to preserve more of them for them. Killing had always been something he was good at. Of course, after staying in the Bawtai prison for 100 years, he had already lost a lot of his viciousness. However, the moment he stepped onto this land, his blood started to boil. He wanted to kill. He had a strong desire to kill. This land was her hometown. He had also stepped onto this land back then. He sat at the edge of the cliff and watched the sunset and sunrise. At that time, she was sitting not far away, watching him quietly. She was a kind girl. She should not have died so casually and quietly. He had to kill some people, those who forced her to her death. There were too many people here, and all of them looked repulsive. Therefore, he could only kill them all in order to calm the agitation in his heart. Violent battle waves have been detected in the south of the city. 2 level 10 experts have come out of the palace and are rushing towards the south of the city. Just as Meg and the others were about to set off, the black bat sitting on Meg's shoulder suddenly spoke. Camilla's voice rang out clearly. Meg was a little surprised. Irina hadn't set off yet, so this commotion was a little strange. Could it be that the hairless monk has taken action? The only possibility that Meg could think of was that the hairless monk had launched an attack and caused a huge commotion, which successfully attracted the attention of the 2 10th-tier experts. Since that's the case, it's time for us to take action. A smile appeared on Meg's face. With the addition of the hairless monk, the strength of both parties gradually became balanced. If that's the case, then I'll go to the west of the city and walk around again. I'll try my best to get close to the palace. If you guys encounter any danger, I'll come over immediately. Irina said to everyone. She stood up, and a huge array appeared under her feet, which almost covered the entire room. With a flash of light, everyone disappeared from the room. The oil lamp on the table was also extinguished. Meg and the others only saw a flash of light before their eyes, and they had already appeared outside a majestic palace. Report your coordinates to me if you encounter any danger, Irina said to Meg before disappearing again. Meg looked at the resplendent palace that was still illuminated by flames and lights in the night, and narrowed his eyes slightly. 3 meters away, there was a light shield that was faintly visible to the naked eye. It was like an inverted bowl that covered the entire palace. Follow me. I know where to avoid all the mechanisms and protective shields and sneak in. Connie waved at everyone, and took the lead to sneak into the bushes on the left. Follow me. Meg was the first to catch up with Connie. This was her home, after all. Although there was a change of owner now, everything couldn't be changed. After going around half of the palace, Connie led everyone and found a secret passageway in a patch of withered bushes. She also confirmed that they could enter and exit without causing a huge commotion in the restaurant. However, does this really not look like a hole for puppies to enter and exit? Amy asked softly. Everyone's expression was a little strange. Speaking of which, that was exactly what they were worried about. The cats in the palace will enter and exit from here occasionally. The palace doesn't keep dogs, Connie explained. Then, she walked towards the passageway and said, I'll go in first. If there's anything else, contact me through the walkie-talkie. Everyone watched as Connie disappeared into the passageway very quickly. After hesitating for a while, they all followed her through the passageway. The other end of the passageway was located in the hollow of a big tree. It didn't look eye-catching at all. They entered the palace through this secret passageway, and indeed didn't cause any ripples in the protective shield. This should be where the garden is. We're not in a hurry to go deeper. We'll take action after Gary is lured away. Meg looked around, and quickly determined their location based on some landmark buildings. He gestured for everyone to stay put and wait for further instructions. Irina and Rex had already successfully lured away 3 10th-tier powerhouses. As long as Gary couldn't hold back his temper, they would be free to search this palace. The strong magic waves in the West City quickly spread out. Meg and the rest could clearly feel that terrifying power from the palace, as well as the violent waves caused by the magic explosions. There are more 10th-tier powerhouses? In the passageway of the secret chamber, Gary stopped in his tracks, and looked toward the West City as if he sensed something. His gloomy face seemed to be in deep thought. After a moment of silence, he decisively turned around and walked toward the passageway. Gary returned to the hall, and ordered, pass down my orders. Get Basil to return to the palace immediately. Yes. A voice sounded from outside the hall. 2 orcs immediately left to carry out the order. You want to lure me away as well so that you can search the palace, right? I'd like to see if you can snatch him away from me. Gary smirked, and turned to enter the passageway again. The passageway that led downwards was inlaid with luminous gems, and the gentle glow illuminated the passageway. At the end of the passageway that was more than 10 meters long was a rather spacious room. A young orc was sitting at the table with a pot of steaming tea in front of him. Gary sat down in front of that young orc, and said with a sarcastic smile, Someone is here to save you. I didn't expect anyone in this world to come and save me. That young orc laughed self-deprecatingly. He suddenly coughed violently, and slowly tightened his grip on the white handkerchief that was covering his mouth. A bright red color slowly spread out on the handkerchief. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1542. Attention, all units. Attention, all units. The 10th-tier orc in the north of the city is heading toward the palace instead of the west. He's not heading toward the west. Camilla's voice suddenly sounded from the bat on Meg's shoulder. Are we going back to the palace directly? Meg frowned. This was a little different from what he had planned. Maybe they've already realized our target. Elizabeth waved her hand, and countless tiny ice crystals flew in all directions. A square ice screen appeared in front of everyone, and various scenes appeared on the ice screen. It was just like the big screen in the surveillance room. From the various scenes on the screen, they could see that the level of defense was increasing rapidly. The patrolling guards had also clearly become denser, and the entire palace seemed to have entered alert mode. Meg was surprised by Elizabeth's showy move, but he also nodded in agreement with her judgment. Everyone knew that everyone's target tonight was Ferdinand because Ferdinand was in Gary's hands, and the initiative was in Gary's hands. As for the commotion in the north, south, and west of the city, it was to make him panic so that they could take advantage of the situation. However, Gary might have seen through their plan now, so he simply ignored their provocation and chose to guard the palace and Ferdinand. This is difficult. Barbara kicked a small rock in front of her, and looked around. Then, where do I need to set up the teleportation portal? If there are 2 10th tier orcs, do we still need to try? Everyone frowned. This situation was indeed a little troublesome. That fellow won't be able to return to the palace. Irina's voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. What a confident declaration. However, because she was Irina, it seemed to be a matter of course. Let's go. We should set off too. Meg walked out of the tree hole. If there was only one Gary, they could still give it a try. Even if the worst happened, he was confident that he could get everyone to retreat into the teleportation portal and leave at the risk of being exposed. He hadn't really tested the upper limit of the peak of the 9th tier yet. Elizabeth, you're in charge of monitoring and guiding the way. Avoid all patrolling orcs and enter the palace in the quietest way possible. Meg looked at Elizabeth and said. The method of receiving images through the icicles was simply too practical. It was equivalent to turning most of the palace into their home ground. All right. Elizabeth nodded and slid her finger on the ice curtain. The 2-meter-long ice curtain quickly shrank until it was only half a meter square and floated to her left. She took the lead and walked forward. Keep up, don't make any noise. Meg said to everyone, letting them go first while he was in charge of bringing up the rear. With Elizabeth's guidance, the group easily avoided all the patrolling guards and quietly entered the interior of the palace. Although this palace in the Falk tribe couldn't be compared to the Roth Empire's royal palace, it was still considered a large-scale castle. It was built with black rocks of equal size, and had a huge space inside. It was separated into many areas by intersecting corridors, and there were many rooms. After Meg and the rest entered the castle, they started to check the rooms one by one according to the information they got from the Grey Temple. The entire Falk tribe was shrouded in a dangerous and tense atmosphere. This also caused many people to be awake even though it was already late at night, and caused some trouble for their search. Barbara put her hands down slowly and softly said, "The palace maids in this room have all fainted. They will be fine after sleeping for a while, and waking up tomorrow morning." Everyone accidentally entered a palace maid's bedroom. Luckily, they managed to subdue all of them before they screamed in terror. Meg confirmed their current location and asked Barbara, "Are you sure no one will wake up tonight? I've applied a second vibration curse. If anyone wakes up early, they will be knocked out again." Barbara nodded confidently. "Then, you can set up a teleportation portal here. This location is almost the same distance from our 3 targets. Once something happens, our evacuation time will be close. This is the best place to evacuate." Meg looked around, and pointed at the empty space in the middle of the dormitory. After that, he said to Mia, "Mia, you will be in charge of assisting Barbara." Yaba Mia nodded. She also knew that she wouldn't be able to provide much help in the battle. "All right." Barbara nodded. She poured out a pile of materials for setting up a teleportation portal from her spatial bracelet. There was an extremely high requirement for the materials and the method of setting up a teleportation portal. The shorter the activation time, the higher the precision required. Ordinary advanced formation masters would have to spend a few days to set it up. However, as a genius formation master who could repair ancient teleportation portals, this level of teleportation portal was nothing to Barbara. After working at Mamie's for a few months, the world might have forgotten that she was the princess of the Moon Nation, the youngest advanced space magic caster, and a genius formation master, Barbara Nyubalu. These are the 3 places we need to explore tonight. They include a royal secret dungeon, a possible dungeon, and a treasure trove. Meg pointed at the 3 marked points on the map. He looked at Elizabeth, Yabamiya, and Gina, and said, "We will be divided into 2 groups. Amy and I will explore the possible dungeon, while Elizabeth will bring Gina to investigate the secret dungeon. Remember, try not to get into a fight. We have to confirm Ferdinand's location before alerting the enemy. Otherwise, the plan will fail. Once we trigger the mechanism in the palace or get exposed, return to the palace maid's dormitory immediately. We have to leave before the enemy's 10th-tier powerhouse finds us." "Safety first," Meg said seriously as he looked into Elizabeth's eyes. "All right." Elizabeth looked into Meg's eyes and nodded slightly. She looked at Amy, and then at Meg. She hesitated for a moment and said, "Maybe it's more reasonable to change the team." Everyone's gaze was also on Meg. Although they vaguely knew that his strength was not bad, he was not a real knight, after all. They were already a little surprised that he was personally taking part in and commanding the operation today. Now that he was going to personally bring Amy to investigate, they couldn't help but feel worried. Meg also realized that he seemed to be too arrogant, which didn't suit his elegant and kind restaurant owner persona. He smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. It's only a warehouse over there, and we're not sure if there's a secret dungeon. If there is, I'll return immediately to seek help. Be careful." Elizabeth knew that Meg wasn't someone who would joke about Amy's safety. She pondered for a moment, and then left with Gina. "Let's go, Miss Amy. It's time for us to set off." Meg helped Amy tidy up her black night suit, and then held her little hand as they left the palace maid's dormitory. The place they were going to was a real dungeon. According to the Grey Temple's intelligence, there were a few important prisoners locked up there, but they weren't sure if Ferdinand was one of them. "Assassin Miss Amy, ready." Amy replied softly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She's really the same as her mother. She just wants to see the world burn. Meg couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1543. Those foolish fellows. They keep thinking that they can overthrow me and establish a legitimate folk tribe as long as they save you. Gary looked at the skinny young orc sitting opposite him with a mocking smile. One must always have a dream. The young orc laughed self-deprecatingly before he started coughing violently again. His skinny body was hunched over, and a few veins were popping out on his forehead due to the pain. "To a certain extent, I should thank you." Gary looked at that young orc with pity. "That seat originally belonged to you, but you will never be able to sit there for the rest of your life. You know that I never have any extravagant hopes." The young orc raised his head to look at Gary. "You will die tomorrow, and I will give you a dignified death. Take it as my last gift to you." Gary stood up and walked out of the stone temple. The door to the stone temple closed slowly, and the sound of footsteps disappeared. The young orc, who was originally hunched over and coughing in pain, straightened his back slowly. The pain and disheveled look on his face disappeared without a trace. He looked in the direction of the door with a slight smirk on his face. "Uncle, I hope that the conferring gift I give you tomorrow won't shock you too much," a soft murmur reverberated in the secret chamber. "Amy, there are 30 guards in the prison in front, including 1 9th-tier orc and 2 7th-tier orcs. I will open that door, and we only have 30 seconds to kill or subdue all the guards and close the door again. Can you do it?" Meg stopped at the side of a long corridor with Amy. He slowly took out a small mirror and glanced at the situation in the corridor. 2 orc guards were standing at the door with vigilance. Behind them were 2 thick and heavy stone doors. They had been standing here for a while. The patrolling guards had a 10-minute interval between going back and forth, and the footsteps of the latest patrol team had not completely faded away. Amy nodded hard. "Very good. Now, I need you to use ice element magic to freeze those two orcs. It's best if you can maintain their current posture and expressions, Meg continued. Okay. A magic staff appeared in Amy's hand. She began to chant a spell silently. Thin, almost invisible threads of frost rushed toward the two orcs at the end of the corridor from all directions. Did you hear the commotion outside? Is someone attacking our tribe? An orc asked softly. Don't worry. Our Falk tribe is the second largest orc tribe, and Chief Gary is even more powerful. No one can break into the palace, another orc said with a relaxed expression. That's true. The orc who spoke earlier chuckled and suddenly shivered. He muttered, Don't you feel cold all of a sudden? A little. I think someone forgot to close the door again. Another orc nodded. At this moment, an unstable domain of extreme cold formed in the space where the two orcs were. The two orcs were frozen into ice sculptures before they could even react. Done. Amy put down her magic caster's staff, and the cold aura slowly dissipated. She said excitedly, I've frozen them. Let's go. Mag looked at the two orcs who froze at the same time, and brought Amy to the prison at the end of the corridor. The two fifth-tier orcs guarding the door stood in front of the stone door. However, one couldn't tell that they had been frozen from the outside. It was enough to fool the patrol team that passed by a dozen meters away. Amy, after entering this door, you'll be in charge of slowing down their movements and stopping them from making any noise. Leave the rest to me. Meg pressed his hand gently on a dent above the stone door. A bluish-green light lit up and circled around Meg's hand. The stone door began to open inward slowly. All right. I will do my best to cooperate with Father. Amy nodded obediently. She raised her magic caster's staff again, and began to chant softly at the same time. The highest level alert order had already been sent to every corner of the palace. The only publicly established prison in the palace naturally received the order too. Warden Yuri kicked the jailer who was dozing off against the wall, and woke up all the prisoners in the prison with his scolding. Only then did he feel a little better. There were many prisoners locked up in this prison. Most of them were ministers who were loyal to the former chief, as well as the chief's relatives who had yet to be executed. There were no less than 100 of them. What made Yuri feel relieved was that most of these fellows would be executed tomorrow. As long as they were dead, he wouldn't have to be on tenterhooks every day. He could have a good night's sleep. Stay alert. After tonight, I'll bring everyone to Flower Lane to drink and play with women. Yuri said loudly. Such encouragement immediately received a warm response from the group of animals. A smile appeared on Yuri's face. Gary had promised him that he would also be conferred a title during the conferring ceremony tomorrow, and he wouldn't have to continue staying in this dark prison anymore. Back then, he made a small mistake, and was demoted by the former chief to be the warden of this prison. He stayed there for 50 years, and every time he left, he would need the chief's approval. Although he was a warden, he was actually not much different from a prisoner. Hence, when Gary found him, he agreed to stand on his side almost without much thought. On the day Gary raised his army, he was the one who released those sinners from the tribe from the prison. He used their strength to tear open the palace's defense line and open the palace gates to welcome Gary, Indiana. Yuri felt that that was probably the best decision he had made in his life. He didn't want to live like a rat in the glorious underground of the palace anymore. Kacha, Kacha, the prison gates slowly opened inwards, and everyone looked in the direction of the gates in surprise. Apart from the warden, only the chief and his envoy could open the prison gates directly from the outside. Could the chief have some orders in the middle of the night? However, when everyone's gazes landed on the two figures standing at the gates, one big and one small, they were all stunned. Do it. The two cold words came out of Meg's mouth. His body had already shot out like a cheetah, and crashed into Yuri, who was standing in the middle of the tunnel. Amy raised the magic caster's staff in her hand high, and chanted, "Frost, listen to my command. Freeze everything." The chill descended instantly, and white frost spread rapidly from the ground. The air seemed to have become stagnant because of the cold. "Enemy," as Yuri retreated, he opened his mouth to give a warning. Almost at the same time, he reached out to pull out the long saber at his waist. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."